Guys, I've come to a conclusion here, and I'm going to sound like the old man yelling at clouds, perhaps, but here is the epiphany that I came to on the way in.
That's our average Thursday, by the way. But
that's right.
Go on.
And when you look at the National Football League, and I say this with understanding of why it is, but I'm like, man, like this is the gig. Because when you get and I understand the physicality that takes place with playing in the NFL, and I understand the reason for rest days, but the PTO days of the NFL is something, isn't it? Like you get a lot of days off. You get Monday, Tuesday off if you win, and then like you get a rest day on Wednesday. Well, let's go. Sign me up.
You're looking to make a career change now that you know about their policy for days off?
I have a feeling my athletic career was pretty good until I was about 16, and then all of a sudden
Can
I was like,
you hit
wait
from
a minute.
50? Because that's really all that matters
That's
at
right.
this stage.
Well, I had a groin.
All right.
The Colts, and I know that it's the difficulty today in 2024 in the National Football League, to be truthful, is it is difficult sometimes to navigate through an injury report because when you look at the injury report, sometimes you don't know whether a guy is truly injured. And I'm going to go back to, I've said this a lot. I understand it. I don't have a problem with it. I want to be clear on that. I understand why it is. Every player in professional sports now, more so than ever before, and true, it is relative. You know, if Johnny Bench or Pete Rose was making $300,000 a year, and that same player of that same production is now making $45 million a year, it is true that in 1974, somebody who today makes $70,000 a year was making $18,000 a year. So the relative scale, the scale of relativity, it is still an astronomical amount for back then versus today, for example. But that differential is greater today, I believe, in terms of the money that goes into athletes versus, say, 40 years ago. So there is much more of an investment. And so I understand why professional sports leagues, as a result of that, are extremely protective and, you know, probably erring on the side of caution at all times when it comes to injury. The combination of that, the money that is invested, and the ability, as I mentioned the other day, to now know of an injury that you were unaware of 20 years ago. You know, I go back to like Gale Sayers, and I know that that's even before my time. But Gale Sayers' career ended because he, you know, basically blew out his knee. Well, in today's world, that leaves you out for what, maybe 10 months? And it was a career ender for Gale Sayers. And so part of that, the recovery time is there, so advantage today. But also, when Gale Sayers had that injury, my guess is he did not have an MRI like an hour after it happened or as soon as the swelling went down the next day or whatever else. They probably had to take – I don't know that. That's naive of me. But I think that the ability to recognize and highlight every single little injury that can then compound with further activity is more so today than it was 20 years ago. Thus, when a player has a little nick, it is more protected than it was. The reason I say all of this to open things up today is because if you look at the Colts practice report from yesterday, it looks lengthy. And you think to yourself, man, for only being a quarter of the way through the season, like, can the bye week come now? I'm saying that flippantly. But you have Ryan Kelly still out. You have Kenny Moore did not practice. You have Kwity Paye did not practice. You have Braden Smith did not practice. You have Grant Stewart did not practice. Jonathan Taylor did not practice. Anthony Richardson wasn't going to practice, then did practice on a limited basis. And Zaire Franklin's under the weather, so that's a different story. But Jacksonville's in the same boat. The bottom line is it almost feels like it should be like a MASH unit theme song that plays before each practice report now because teams just get banged up. But it is difficult to know, like Braden Smith didn't practice because of rest. So it becomes difficult to know whether guys are being held out for extreme precaution, Jimmy, or guys are being held out because they are in serious jeopardy of not playing in the upcoming game. For this particular group, my assumption would be Ryan Kelly and Jonathan Taylor are the two that I think you would say, okay, it wouldn't surprise me if they don't play. A lot of the others, it feels like they would be trending in the direction of playing on Sunday, but they are being protected over the course of the week for the reasons that I explained earlier.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the days off and the stacked days off that happen in the National Football League. And anytime there's really any soreness, especially for star players, you see that trend around the NFL. Okay, we'll give you a day off here, a rest day here, a limited participant on Thursday, and then we'll see what happens on Friday. I mean, the way that Jonathan Taylor spoke to the media a little bit earlier today, I'm sure we'll get into that as well, but he mentioned that he was not going to practice again today. So that's back-to-back DNPs for him. He mentioned in the range of, 48 hours or so to get himself right. Really, the Friday practice report, we do have audio on that? Okay, let's take a listen.
Yeah, what's today? Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we got 48, really 72, but really 48 hours. So just keep continuing to take it day by day. I'll go in there and do some stuff today to just kind of get a gauge of it as well today. But it's a day-to-day thing. So being able to go ahead and attack every single day, full force, because you never know. A lot of special things have happened in a couple of days.
That our friend James Boyd over at The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at Romeoville Kid. I don't want to undercut the engagement that happens with these injury reports on Twitter for the Colts and other teams, but as long as you are, or until you get to Friday's side of the ledger on practice reporting, it really doesn't concern me all that much. That's the one I really look for because that's the last one you're going to get until game time decisions or final setup before kick on Sunday. But I will agree with you on the aspect of where Jonathan Taylor is at right now and likely Ryan Kelly. That might be a situation where you don't have either one of them. And it goes back to Eddie's question yesterday. Where would this team be or where will they be if Anthony Richardson goes and there's no Jonathan Taylor? That takes away the entire purported safety net for him, Jake, in terms of his development. When you look at who is behind Jonathan Taylor who's behind Jonathan Taylor on the depth chart and where Anthony Richardson now is suddenly forced to make more decisions that have more on his plate without that safety blanket.
Big topic of conversation today on a Thursday. How are you? My name is Jake Query. That is Jimmy Cook. Eddie Garrison is here as well. It's Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. A lot to talk about today leading up to what's a big one for the Colts in Jacksonville because the Jaguars, we've talked about it all week, this is a team that has the Colts number in terms of playing in Jacksonville. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is when the Colts go down there. I've mentioned before, Jacksonville's kind of cool because Maxwell House Coffee has like a huge roasting plant in downtown Jacksonville, and you walk outside in Jacksonville, you would think, like when you think Jacksonville, Florida, and I like Jacksonville, okay? But when you think Jacksonville, Florida, I think a lot of people think like denim cutoffs, the shirt that's cut like the 1977 shirt that just is like cut off at the mid-waist, tank tops, a lot of tank tops, flip-flops, big
Crop
military
tops all around.
town. But Leonard Skinner's from Jacksonville. So you think about like just some, guitar picking music. I like Jacksonville. But when you think of all that, what you don't realize is when you wake up in the morning in downtown Jacksonville, you're not smelling like the ocean. It's kind of there's a bunch of beaches off of it. You're not aware of the fact that it's the largest by land size city in the United States. You wake up and you're like, I smell good to the last drop. The Maxwell House Coffee aroma is just going up. Maybe that's what is, instead of giving the Colts perk when they go down to Jacksonville, maybe that's lulling them, and that's why it's been nearly a decade since they've won down there.
Caffeine withdrawals, you think, are
Yes.
just set up there?
Maybe that's it. Maybe they're listening to too much Leonard Skinner. Or maybe, like when I went down to Jacksonville to cover a Colts-Jags game like 10 years ago, it's been more than that, probably 15 years ago, and they hired me a freelance photographer from Jacksonville, my buddy Tom Stalling, so I became really good buddies with. So I don't know this guy. I go down there. I'm working for Channel 6, and they're like, yeah, we're using a photographer from down locally. I go, okay. So this guy, meet up with this guy, and he goes, hey, Saturday night, there's a cool little bar that I go to. We can just go there. And I said, okay. So we go, and I'm not going to say any names, but two other people in the local media meet up with us, and we get to the bar, and he goes, guys, here's the thing. I didn't tell you this, but I'm here all the time, so I basically have an open tab. So people are doing shots and drinking and whatever else, and I was kind of just laying back watching all the fun and the mayhem. Next morning, one of the other local Indianapolis media people threw up on the field in Jacksonville because, it was a long night, right? Not for me, not for person number 2, but for the third media member, booted on the field. Now, maybe
I don't know. John was with you at Jacksonville.
John was not there. So maybe the Stallings has taken the Colts out every night to locals, which was the bar that we were at. Maybe that's what it is.
Maybe
I don't know what it is.
there's something embedded in the phrase Duval, and it just gets in the Colts' heads. I don't know. Maybe.
How about maybe it's the mascot, Jackson DeVille?
Yeah.
Big fan of Jackson DeVille. One of the better mascots in the league. I don't know what it is, but the bottom line is you almost, and I know that it's a cliche, throw out the records. These two teams, throw out the records. They're rivals. Records up. But there is an element of truth, and it is a little bit dangerous when you think about it because you wouldn't think this is the case when you have a team that's winless. You wouldn't think that that's dangerous, but as much as I hate saying it because it sounds so absurd, do you really look – Jacksonville is like the Keystone Cops. They can't get out of their own way. But in terms of their roster and the recent taste of it that they've had, it does feel like they are better. I know you are what your record says you are. But doesn't it feel like they are better than a winless team and that they are a little bit dangerous because they're at home? And you know that for them, this truly is a boulder in the stream game for them in terms of if they're going to have any chance of salvaging this year, it's got to start now. And if they lose this one, it's over.
Yeah, if you're still entertaining the idea the Jaguars are going to the playoffs, which to be clear, I'm not, you have to have this game. And to your point about them looking at least a little bit more intimidating, I highlighted this yesterday. They were right there with Houston throughout that entire game. It takes a late touchdown by C.J. Stroud to be able to beat the Jaguars and stave off embarrassment and an upset against Jacksonville. So this is still a team with pieces that in the receiving core, it's easy to look at it and say, I don't see how Gabe Davis really fits in this offense, but Christian Kirk's been reliable for them, and their rookie wide receiver, and Brian Thomas Jr., is starting to come on, and they still have Trevor Lawrence, even if there's times where the line still looks really bad, and that's 2 consecutive years you're looking at that, and there's other times where it feels like he's bailing on some pockets that he shouldn't be. But they put together at least a strong enough sample size a week ago against Houston where you can't just afford to look at it and say, this is one of the worst the Jaguars have looked during this 10-year gap for the Colts for wins in that building. You need to still look at them as a team that is backs against the wall, has some talented weapons across their roster, and took your AFC South title rival, if you will, going up against Houston this year, trying to keep pace with them. They took them all the way down to the final play of that game. So, yeah, you can't just show up in Jacksonville and say, we're going to turn out the noise. We're not worried about a decade's worth of losses. That's other teams. We're just focused on us. You cannot underestimate Jacksonville, even though they might be 0-4 right now.
Now, one thing we know is that Jags fans have been confident for a long time, right? Jags fans have been confident for a long time. They've had plenty of opportunity to get excited. They've had plenty of for example, in the past, they've had great drafts.
Sure.
They've had great drafts where they got good players. They thought they had good players. And then they also have their own theory as to why things just never took off. For example, this classic bit here from, I believe they call it the First Coast in Florida here. Here we go.
First picks, they say they have the best draft in the entire NFL. Are you surprised to hear that?
Certainly not. The first year we took it to the limit. And I was in Miami with my new beach house. Well, it was a couple minutes from the beach.
It's been 20 years since then. We haven't been too strong in the last few years.
Oh, we've been strong. We're just playing by the rules. You can't have a newcomer come in and steal the show.
Okay. So are they still a newcomer? Are they still not wanting to steal the show because they're a newcomer? Is that what's going on in Jacksonville?
Implying a newcomer since 95 when they expanded? That's what's
I
being implied there?
There's only one question going through my mind listening to that. Oh, I forgot to put it up.
Oh.
No, what's the
What are
question?
you people? On dope?
Well, that might have been the case, actually, with our Jags fan who went viral like 20 years ago with that. Listen, reality is this. Big week for the Colts. Because of not necessarily what is at stake if they win, they have a chance to go over 500, but rather what it would mean if they were to lose. And for Jacksonville, and we're going to talk to J.P. Shadrick coming up just about an hour and 10 minutes from now. We will go down to Jacksonville, part of our road trip. We'll talk to JP from Jags.com and get the perspective of a team that is probably feeling like at this point they are just trying to get a hold of rope to avoid themselves having the season go completely awry, when this is a team and a franchise that, 18 months ago we were saying is ready to take the next step, steal the show, quite frankly. The Jags were ready to steal the show.
Yeah, I mean, I thought 3 years ago when they were able, 2 years ago, I guess, when they bounced back with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence, okay, this is their division title now to be able to control, and no one's going to take this from them. Then enter stage right CJ Stroud, and the Texans are able to capture the AFC South, and now they're the ones hoping to hoist that crown. I do want to bring something up to you, Jake, because you mentioned the fact on the Jaguars side of things that Boulder in the Stream game, fork in the road game for them, they're 0-4, staring 0-5, and no hope of any playoffs right now. For the Colts, we mentioned how critical this next set of 3 games is because of what is on the horizon for them. Houston, Minnesota, Buffalo, the Jets, the Lions. But before that, Jaguars, Titans, Dolphins. Let's say they wind up stumbling this weekend and the streak continues of just disappointing performances in Jacksonville. When do you reach that Boulder in the Stream game for the Colts? Is it against Tennessee? Is it the following week against Miami?
I think that's a great question. I think they've kind of battled their way back towards getting – again, I'm going to go back to this, Jimmy. I have to keep reminding myself of this. I don't know that this year that exists.
Because of Anthony Richardson and what you want out of him?
Because and
his development, we talked about
correct. That? So the only – for most teams in the NFL, the New York Jets, the Baltimore Ravens, the Dallas Cowboys, the Green Bay Packers. For most teams, there is a point in the year where if it hasn't started to take hold, then you say to yourself, okay, we have fallen short of our expectation here, and we've got to start looking at what changes to make moving forward. For the Colts this year, I don't think that game exists at all, except for one thing. And only the Colts know this, and only Anthony Richardson knows this. And we have to remind ourselves of this, as difficult as it is to grasp. This year is about one thing. This year is about the comfort level and the growth of Anthony Richardson. Now, if that comes with a ton of wins, if the roster is so good that even during his development and even during his roller coaster, that they are winning a bunch of games and becoming competitive and putting themselves right in position, then that's wonderful and that's tremendous gravy. But the only Boulder in the Stream that can take place for the Indianapolis Colts in the 2024 season is if there is a moment where they feel like Anthony Richardson, either physically or mentally, has become battered to the point where it is a point of no more progress and only regression that would take place if it were to continue in the same direction, and thus to protect him either physically or just in terms of the mentality of playing quarterback, that they then have to remove him and put Joe Flacco in to finish the rest of the year to protect his psyche or to protect his body. Those are the only two Boulder in the Stream things that can happen for the Colts this year. And I know that that's difficult to grasp. Grasp is the wrong word. Accept. Because we, by nature, as fans, as media, as everything else, and the Colts want to win games. Don't get me wrong. They want to win games. They're not trying to lose games. But if for whatever reason this is a year where the Colts go 7-10, but Anthony Richardson starts to show progress each and every week and starts to show consistency and starts to show better footwork and starts to show an ability to hit the 15-yard pass or the bubble screen with regularity, one would assume that those things are going to translate into a better record. One would assume. But if those things are happening and they're 7-10, I think deep down, if you were to put Truth Serum and Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, Jim Irsay, they would say, hey, we're okay with it. Because Andrew Luck was the anomaly. What happened with Andrew Luck's rookie year was the anomaly. And then water kind of found its level after that. But if you go back to, and I know that they are two tired examples, but in this franchise's history, since coming to Indianapolis, you had three essentially top-flight franchise quarterbacks that you handed the keys over to: Jeff George, Peyton Manning, and Andrew Luck. And if you look at Peyton Manning, he got off to a bad start. NFL record for interceptions by a rookie, under 500 record. You know, what they win 3 games. And then people forget how long it took before they finally kicked down the door and broke through. It was about making sure that Manning, and they did everything they could. They got veteran quarterbacks for him to work with in the room. Manning was a little bit different because he'd been around it his whole life, his whole career. He saw it with his dad. I mean, he kind of got it. He understood it. Luck was a bit of an anomaly. In George's case, they realized they erred because they gave him no resources. They changed coordinators every year. They changed head coaches. They got rid of his best receiver. They got rid of his best offensive lineman, who's going to join us tomorrow, by the way, and Chris Henton. So you learn from each example. And those examples all, if you combine all of them and take little bits, and yes, Shane Steichen wasn't here for those. And yes, Chris Ballard wasn't here for the beginning of Luck, but Jim Irsay was. And Jim Irsay still is the one that is going to have the most ear on this. And so therefore, this year, again, and I know it's not fun, Jimmy. It's not always sexy to say that this year is about the development of one player, but that's really where they are. And I think it speaks to the rest of the roster so far that they are presumably going to be competitive. But the schedule does get real here coming up real quick.
Yeah, I mean, after this stretch of very winnable games for them, that's where stuff really hits the fan. Texans, Vikings, Bills, Jets, Lions. You're trying to balance the development of Anthony Richardson while, in theory, keeping your ability to get one of those last wildcard spots alive.
On the show today, again, big one lined up. Dustin Dopirak going to talk a little Pacers with us. Dustin, Eddie, do we have the last name?
Dopirak.
Thank you. You know, that's a mental hurdle for me. Dopirak, right?
Dopirak.
Dustin Dopirak from the Indianapolis Star going to join us coming up. That'll be in the 1 o'clock hour. We have tickets to give away, again, for Billy Joel and Sting. I've got a new way that we're going to do that today that I will explain on the other side. J.P. Shadrick in just over 1 hour from now, and then the voice of the Colts, Matt Taylor, will join us in the 2 o'clock hour. When we come back, we'll take a further look at where things stand in terms of who is trending in the right direction to be on the field in Jacksonville. That on the other side on this Thursday edition. Query & Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. You just heard from our friends at Jiffy Lube. Opening segment of the program brought to you by Jiffy Lube because, look, you want everything to run smoothly, right? And you want that to be the case in your car as well. If you are a member of one of the monthly car wash programs, any of them, then you simply go in, point that out to your Jiffy Lube helper when you go in, and helper's probably the wrong word, but you simply say to them, like, hey, look, right here. I'm a member of the car wash club, any of them. And when you do that, you're going to get $20 off a signature service oil change and a free tire rotation at Jiffy Lube. Just point it out to one of the team members. How's that from Jiffy Lube? And they will take care of the rest. Big savings from your trusted one-stop shop for all your vehicle maintenance needs, where you never need an appointment at your Jiffy Lube locations around town. They are the best. Glenn up on Pendleton Pike took care of me over the weekend. Great dude. And totally thorough and professional. Absolutely loved it. But big savings at Jiffy Lube, because if you are making sure that your car looks great on the outside, why not make sure that it looks great under the hood as well? All right, when you do the pop of the hood and you do an examination of the Colts in terms of their availability against Jacksonville, I'm going to name for you, Jimmy Cook, the players that at this point were held out of practice yesterday and that we're waiting for today. I mentioned it earlier, but we're going to do it again. But this time I want you to tell me the one not named Anthony Richardson or Jonathan Taylor that you feel is the most critical for the Colts to get back onto the field, okay?
Yep, let's go.
Zaire Franklin is illness, so I guess we'll take him out because I'm assuming that he's probably going to be okay come Sunday, or at least we hope, and I hope he feels better. Ryan Kelly, Kenny Moore, Kwity Paye, Braden Smith, Grant Stewart. That's the list that you have to choose from.
So I cut the list down quite a bit, at least from my perspective of importance going into this game. It's down to Kenny Moore and Kwity Paye for me, and I would take Kenny Moore as my most important piece that you need to have out there on Sunday. For the Colts, this is a Jacksonville team that, yes, statistically speaking, they have struggled with the pass this year. They're still trying to figure things out offensively. There has been issues already up front with the offensive line where I feel like even if you did not have Kwity Paye, you can still generate enough pressure, and maybe this is yet another breakout game for Laiatu Latu. But letting Trevor Lawrence get into a sense of comfortability extends itself when you take away your only veteran presence in the secondary or in the cornerback room with Kenny Moore being out there. So for me, having him back, having a leader within that secondary, while Jalen Jones has looked good at times this season, this is a different stretch of play for Jacksonville right now. I want veteran presence, veteran leadership, a guy that can make almost all the plays. If they don't have Kenny Moore out there on Sunday, that among the injury report list for me would be the biggest backbreaker.
That's fair. Kwity Paye is very important, but at the same time, and part of that too, I think what hurts them right now, Jimmy, is the fact that for Kwity Paye, your conventional wisdom says this. Hey, if Paye can't go, I get it, but they have good depth in terms of their line. Well, that depth is a little bit depleted now, right? I mean, they obviously no Tyquan Lewis, no DeForest Buckner. We know that. So, for that matter, Laiatu Latu, we have yet to see him. He has already shown the flashes of where he can make game-changing plays.
The strip sack was crazy. Yep.
It was. But, you want to get him out there and involved as well. And maybe that helps when you have a Kwity Paye out there with them to kind of along your Kenny Moore thought on the defensive backfield. Hard to argue your rationale on Kenny Moore. I think Braden Smith, now he was a rest yesterday, so he's good to go, so I probably shouldn't have thrown him in there. But he is one that his health obviously kind of oscillates, but he is very important. And we didn't talk enough, I don't think, in the Pittsburgh game. We talked about a lot of areas where Indianapolis was really good. Where we didn't talk about with the Colts, what they did really well was somebody pointed this out to me yesterday. I'm like, what's a great point. You know whose name we never said on Sunday? Well, we didn't say any because we weren't doing a show. But on Monday that we didn't do, and who the broadcasters didn't say a lot on Sunday?
TJ Watt.
Thank you. Like at all, right?
2 tackles. That was it.
Completely eradicated him. Now, the line, and you look at those first 2 drives when Richardson was out there, I mean, they went right down the field, and a lot of that, they went right behind Bortolini for that matter. I mean, they went right to.
You were very impressed with Bortolini.
I was, but partially because the offensive line, the center is so important. not only because it's the anchor of the line, but because they have middle linebacker type responsibilities. When they did the Peyton Manning statue out in front of Lucas Oil Stadium, I personally thought the design of it should have been Manning like in the shotgun formation, pointing out like both hands with like the leg up because he's audible. You know, that the theatrics in the backfield were his entire thing, right?
Yeah.
But in that, if you look at any of those pictures of Manning doing that, what you also see is Jeff Saturday, and more often than not, he himself is pointing one way or the other. Because Jeff Saturday was the first set of eyeballs and voice that was pointing out to the rest of the team what he saw. He was that's the center position. The center is the first person that looks over the way the defense is lined up and then has to compute, okay, look, and make the adjustments, call out the adjustments that might need to be made. I don't know if Bortolini did that or not, but because of the effectiveness with which they not only negated Pittsburgh's defense, but also got push and seemingly had all the right play calls on those first two drives, you would think that he had to be a part of that. But also just in any line of anything, the centerpiece is the one that is kind of the anchor that everything is feeding off of. And so I just thought he was really impressive. But you've got to sustain that now, right? I mean, was that a fluke? We'll see, right? I mean, we may well see that coming up this weekend because we'll see whether or not Ryan Kelly is back with the neck or not. And then outside of that, you know, Jacksonville also is the Jags are pretty banged up. And part of that is, and again, you know, these are all people that are limited. It's not that they're being held out of practice, but not 100%. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, if he's trying to get going and he's trying to get any sort of stability, having one of his most reliable players is probably Evan Ingram, just in terms of like that safety net. He hasn't played in a couple of weeks now. He's limited in trying to come back. And Jimmy, the reality is their receiving core, they invested all this time and money the last couple of years in their receivers, and it just really has yet to take off. I mean, they just have not gotten any sort of footing there at all.
You got one really good year out of Christian Kirk. The second year was and then this year he's still trying to figure out where the flow is in this offense when you add Brian Thomas Jr., who has looked great. He looked really solid against Houston. Gabe Davis limited with a shoulder injury on the last Jaguars practice report yesterday. The other name I'm looking out for is Travis Etienne from the offensive standpoint, and then Josh Hines-Allen, who's always been a massive threat since he's been in the league defensively. He's in concussion protocol as things stand. Did not practice because of that concussion. So they have serious ailments as well. But Jacksonville, again, I can't stress enough, Jake, and I'm not driving the Trevor Lawrence wagon as much as you have at times because you saw what he is, and I've seen what he is, right? I'm still in the boat that's the number one overall pick that's going to figure out at some point.
You see the flashes, right?
You can't have we had on Matt Verderame earlier this week, and he mentioned the fact that, and maybe to some extent this is making excuses for Trevor Lawrence, but there has been some interesting at best, peculiar at worst decisions with how they've built this roster around Trevor Lawrence. And to the point about the offensive line, that's why I'm not as worried if Kwity Paye is forced to miss this game, because worse rushers than Paye have been able to get home and make life difficult for Trevor Lawrence this season. That's why I lean more towards Kenny Moore being the piece that you can't afford to not have out there.
I believe Matt Verderame referred to them as a tire fire. I've always heard dumpster fire, right? A tire fire would be pretty bad, though, right? Didn't we have a tire fire here?
What are we ranking on the fires?
What's that?
What are we ranking? Is dumpster higher than tire?
I think tire fire, here's the thing. Excellent question. I think in the NFL, you are naturally a tire fire because it's seen from further away. Like, if you're a really bad franchise in the American Lacrosse League, that's a dumpster fire because it's not seen by a lot of people. You have to kind of seek it out and look for it, right? But a tire fire, you're talking about like this thick black smoke that, like, everybody sees it. You got a tire fire on Holt Road. People in Fishers are aware of it, right? So I guess in the NFL, so tire fire would be worse than dumpster fire, right? And then you'd have just like small pail fire, which isn't, that's just like you got like one guy that's hurt. That's just a small little trash can fire.
Bonfire, right? Surprisingly enough, still a good thing in the NFL.
That's right. Texas A&M, they love it, right? Yep. When we come back, sad news in the world of sports. We'll explain. You had to do it to me, didn't you, Eddie?
I did.
This goes back to one of the great posts on the Twitter X of all time. And Eric sent this to me. I remember this from several years ago. I was on a one-man mission. Two things that again, every once in a while things just come to me, right? And then I speak I speak them out into the universe, and then they become reality. Now, one of them is, of course, why not Indiana? And folks, don't kid yourself. Attorneys now involved, the trademark going through, and I'm not kidding you when I tell you. T-shirts, hats, bumper stickers, all of it, right? I'm telling you. And that's taken off. I mean, people are aware of the whole, it can be used in a million different ways. Are you looking for your business to move to a state with low taxes and great schools? Why not Indiana? Billboards, you name it, right? Are you thinking about a college football team that's off to a 5-0 start, is now ranked, and might blaze their way into the expanded college football playoff? Why not Indiana? Are you thinking about the Eastern Conference in the NBA playoffs and the team that last year knocked on the door but now is ready to kick it down and represent the East in the finals? Why not Indiana? Endless. The other one is, and that leads to our sad world today in sports. Several years ago, that's when I came up with Cute Fella. If you look at the Orioles hat, and I couldn't believe it. I was stunned when I researched the Baltimore Orioles, which were formerly, which one of you can tell me?
Don't have it.
I'm
No.
fairly certain on this. Now that I think about it, I'm getting second thoughts. But, Eddie, if you could, please, as the fact checker, look this up for me. I believe they were originally the St. Louis Browns. I believe the St. Louis Browns, who had the last National Leaguer to win the Triple Crown, Joe Ducky Medwick in 1932, eventually
Ducky.
left.
I forgot about him.
That's right. Eventually left and went to Baltimore and became the Baltimore Orioles. I believe that's correct, but I could be wrong on that.
So I'm in my search bar. I'm typing, "Why are the Baltimore Orioles?" and it says, "Good, so bad." That's the first two. Not playing today. That's another option.
Okay, thanks. So here's the thing. So I came up with Cute Fella just because the bird on the hat is the Cute Fella. And that's when I researched and looked up that his name is the Baltimore, it's the Oriole bird. And I'm like, who came up with that? So I came up with Cute Fella, and it became a big thing. And even when we were racing for IndyCar outside of Camden Yards, the women there at the gift shop, the official gift shop of the Baltimore Orioles, made me a T-shirt with him on it that said #CuteFella. So I had the Orioles on board. Everybody was on board. And then somebody posted this, one of the great posts of all time on the X Twitter that was sent to me. A gentleman was overseas, I believe in Tokyo, and he has a picture of himself with a guy wearing a Cute Fella hat. And he said, spotted this guy on the train, yes, in Tokyo. Asked, how about them O's? Very dryly, he responded in a German accent. Oh, I see. It's because of the points at the hat. I just like the duck. I think it's cool. But the Cute Fella, once again, has a summer of dreams that are taken away from us before our very eyes. They are out now, and they are one of the teams that I took in our race for the six-pack. The O's are done, right?
So per the bio on MLB.com, and I don't know if there's footage of this, if this is just written for a good backstory, or if this actually happened, on April 6, 1979, the Oriole bird hatched out of a giant egg at Memorial Stadium and became the official mascot of the Baltimore Orioles. Do you think there's footage of that, photos of that?
Has to be.
Of the bird
Has
just, seeing the world?
It was like 2 years before. That's right around the time that Orc hatched from...
And it said, hey...
Lork, I should say.
First words. A lot of people don't know that.
That were his first words. Did you look it up, Eddie? Did you find out whether or not the Baltimore Orioles were, in fact, the St. Louis Browns?
They were indeed.
And they moved to Baltimore in what year?
1954.
You realize we're at a point within this show where you could pretty much tell me anything and I'm going to side with you? Like I'm going to take my chances.
Is that because I'm intimidating to you?
No,
that is a very dangerous thing to say out loud there, Jimmy.
I mean it. I'll clarify it a little bit. Fine. Maybe I went too extreme. In terms of historical sports contests, whenever there's a brain dropping from Jake Query, I feel like, thank you, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be accurate.
Well, thank you.
St. Louis Browns? Never would have pulled that out.
What about Joe Ducky Medwick? Am I getting no credit there?
That was impressive.
Can you look up Joe Ducky Medwick and tell me what year he won the Triple Crown, Eddie? I'm guessing it was 1932. Joe Ducky Medwick, by the way, was also removed from a World Series for his own safety after getting into an altercation with fans who began throwing things at him. I don't know whether or not that's how he got his name Ducky.
Did you know he was a part of the Gas House Gang?
I did know that.
Not 1932, by the way.
What year was it?
1937.
Okay, so
Then
Scotty Johnston, who he is truly the true historian of the fan, has walked in while nodding his head. Scotty, are you nodding because the Browns are the Orioles or because Joe Ducky Medwick is the last National Leaguer to win the Triple Crown? Both.
37 was what I was coming in to say.
37 is correct. Sorry, I said 32. It was 37.
Apparently, Newt Rockne made arrangements for Medwick to play at the University of Notre Dame, but he chose baseball instead.
Really? Okay. I
Tying
wonder
it
what
back
position,
local.
what position would a guy named Ducky have played? Do we know?
Tailback.
And
Tailback.
do you
Come
think it's
on.
weird that Ducky played for the
I'll do
St.
it
Louis
myself.
Browns, who became the Orioles, which then somebody in Germany actually thought were the Ducks? That's the other thing that comes into play here, right? Speaking of the Ducks, they're going to get stunned on October 16th when they visit Purdue. I'm talking about Oregon, who is now a member of the Big Ten. And, we just touched on it a little bit there, Jimmy. And we talked about it yesterday. We will probably later in the show today. But it is kind of a big one for Indiana on that side of things going into Northwestern. I'm curious to talk to Chris Hinton about this tomorrow because the former Colt, whose son plays for Michigan, but he also played at Northwestern. And, it feels to me, can it be for Indiana a trap game? That's my question for you. Can this actually be a trap game for Indiana? Or is Indiana not at the point and not used to success enough to even know what a trap game is?
No. I'll go one better than that, Jake. It's not a trap game because Kurt Cignetti sets the traps. He's not falling into them.
I like that. You don't think, though, that they can go into it? Because I think there is so much attention on...
I think Michigan State, to your earlier point yesterday, is the trap game because you have Michigan on the horizon. I think if you win 3 more games
You
in a
don't
row...
think Nebraska on the horizon is...
I mean, maybe.
You got a bye week leading up to that Nebraska game.
That is true. You have a get-right week. I think that you outlined it the other day about where is there intimidation still on the schedule, not named Michigan and Ohio State, and there's not a ton of areas to point to it. But perhaps it is Michigan State because at that point, you're really on the doorstep Final Four games of that chatter is going to get real. Like, you're already seeing the joke, hey, 30% chance to make the playoff.
Right.
That chatter is going to increase the more you start stacking wins.
Here is the one area where, to me, I have to remind myself of today's college student and athlete. Nebraska football is Indiana basketball. I've said this before. To today's 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, Nebraska football is Indiana basketball. They have a guy coaching them that they're hoping is going to be the gateway to get great players because he was once a professional coach, and maybe that means now that kids are going to want to go play there.
I wouldn't show them any tape of his time as a professional coach.
What's that?
I said I wouldn't show them any tape of his time as a professional
You're talking
coach.
about Matt Rule,
Yes,
not Mike Woodson.
Yeah,
but you get
sorry.
my point,
Yes, sorry.
right?
Yes, to be clear.
They are programs that used predominantly players from their area and their backyard to build a dynasty under one coach, even though there was previous history. One coach became synonymous with the program over a 30-year stretch, and they won multiple national championships with it. That coach departed, and they've been chasing ever since, trying to find the right fit for long term. And the fan base assumes that, nationally speaking, people look at and see the name of that program and immediately hearken it up into the ranks of, in Indiana's case, the North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, UCLA, Duke. And in Nebraska football case, Nebraska fans think that they still should be in the same breath and mention as USC and Alabama and Georgia and Florida State and whoever it may be. And the reality is that we are now a decade or more removed from when that national relevance was there outside of the enthusiasm for the fan base. I'm not saying this to backslap Indiana or backhand, I should say, Indiana or Nebraska, but it's just reality. And so I think to myself, Nebraska coming to Indiana is like, wow, that's a big one for Indiana because you're going to have fans from Nebraska traveling. But then I have to remind myself that to a 19 or 20-year-old, Nebraska is probably hardly intimidating. I mean, you're like, okay. I mean, they're probably thinking like Nebraska, okay. I mean, they've been, in my entire time playing high school football and now that I'm in college, Nebraska has been, a 500 program. And this year, I think people thought that Nebraska was off to the kind of start where it's like, okay, these guys are going to be good. But they've already slipped up. And where do they go from here? I don't know. Yeah, I did go to a Nebraska game a couple years ago. It was pretty awesome.
It was a fight against Illinois. They bounced back against Purdue. They got a good quarterback. We'll see what happens in a couple weeks. But no, I think Cignetti's trap game proof.
Actually, Illinois. Does Indiana have Illinois on the schedule?
They do not.
Because that could be kind of. I mean, Illinois might actually. We've been saying this forever, right? With Bielema, Illinois, I think might actually be decent. Dustin Dopirak, I think I said that right. Indianapolis Star, Pacers writer, joins us top of the hour. Dustin, excuse me, just a couple of minutes from now from the Indianapolis Star. On this Thursday edition of Aquarium Company, we have tickets to give away again for Billy Joel and Sting. Here's how we're going to do it today, simply because we've got kind of a loaded show. JP Shadrick going to join us bottom of the hour. We're going to go to Jacksonville, get the lowdown on how the Jags are stacking up and what the Colts might be facing in terms of who's in and who's out for Jacksonville and why, in fact, We might ask him if it's a tire fire or a dumpster fire. Dumpster fire is contained. Tire fire rages all over the place. Somebody pointed that out to me.
I would say a dumpster fire is chaos. Like, you're thinking of, like, rioting, and you're thinking of, like, madness happening.
Yeah, but it's contained, though. Like, it's not going to go beyond the dumpster, right? Because a dumpster is a big, huge, like, so you've at least have it somewhat under control, whereas a tire fire, you're just like, oh, my gosh, this thing's just spreading all over the place, and it's coming from all angles. And a tire fire can be seen from a lot further away. But we'll ask JP, which I'm sure he'll be thrilled with that question. Hey, JP, I know you work for Jags.com. Would you say more it's a dumpster fire or a tire fire?
I will admit, visually from Google Images, tire fire does seem more intimidating. I might not have thought that going in today, but it's epic.
Well, don't you remember it was a couple of years ago, and I'm not making light of it, but there was I want to say there was, like, on the near west side, a fire that included a bunch of tires a couple of years ago, and, like, the smoke was, I mean, it's insane.
Do you think dumpster fire gets used more because it's inherently trash, and that's usually what these organizations that aren't run well are?
Yes, honestly. And I think Eddie's correct. Like, dumpster fire is usually caused by, like, a bunch of PO'd people that just dump a Roman candle into a dumpster during, like, they're upset about something. Or maybe they're happy because their team just won. I don't know which one it would be, right? But maybe it's one of those two. But here's how we're going to do the ticket giveaway today. At some point in this hour, the song that you hear coming out of a break is going to be one that is either The Police or Sting. Either from The Police or Sting. And when that happens, that is your call to action. That is telling you that it is time to call in. And if you are at that point, caller number 4, then you are on your way to go see Sting and Billy Joel. February 8th is the concert. Tickets go on sale tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact, from Live Nation and Ticketmaster and your ticket outlets for that concert, Billy Joel. But we have the tickets right here, and we will give some away tomorrow as well. In terms of the Pacers, as it's hard to believe, Jimmy, that the time is here. They've made a couple of interesting moves here in terms of, we don't talk about Weissman. We don't talk about now that they have also signed Jahlil Okafor. I mean, they're going with, and those are obviously kind of flyer contracts. But I think it's interesting that as a franchise that is pretty set in their roster, that they do have the flexibility to be able to take a few of those flyers. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line from the Indianapolis Star, he is the beat writer for the Pacers. We're talking about Dustin
Dopirak.
Thank you, Eddie. He joins us now on the program. Hi, Dustin. How are you?
Doing good, Jake. How about yourself?
I cannot complain. And thank you for recording that for us so that I can always make sure that, again, with my last name being Query, I'm very sensitive to making sure people's last names are pronounced correctly. Let's begin with this. Going into now as the Pacers get back together again, we know the story, obviously, of Tyrese Halliburton playing in, the Olympics and putting on some muscle mass, and Rick Carlisle talking about the ability to be a better defender for the team. But in your opinion, the thing that you are most intrigued by going into this season for Indiana that you want to try to get answered during their camp would be what?
That's a good question. Because I don't know if they're going to answer it in camp. I mean, you mentioned the muscle mass thing, and that matters because I think Halliburton becoming a good defender is really important. I'm not sure that this offseason could have been enough. I mean, he had too much going on, obviously, just coming back from injury and, the Olympics and everything else. I think it's just how is I don't think we're going to see this in this camp, but I think the big question is just like, how are these guys going to deal with success? Basically, how are they going to deal with the fact that they are going to come into this, with not a target on their backs? I mean, they're one of the teams that everybody's concerned about in the East. I mean, obviously, I think they're operating with, okay, we're being disrespected. Nobody thinks we're getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals. Which is true, and I think I just read an Athletic article today saying that everybody thinks, okay, who's the best challenger for the Celtics, and no one's thinking it was the team that just played them in the finals. Everyone's thinking the Knicks or the 76ers or maybe even Milwaukee, and Orlando is kind of the dark horse and really kind of leaving the Pacers out of that discussion. So obviously the thing that's going to drive them, but it is going to be an issue where you're not going to play anyone who's going to forget about you. at all. And so you're also going to have you're still going to have the same situation where everybody that's bad is targeting you too. So I think it's a question of how are they going to handle that? How are they going to handle just, if it doesn't start out as well as they hoped it would? It is obviously a very difficult beginning to the schedule right out of the gate. Obviously the Pistons is winnable, but you look at Knicks, Orlando, Philly after that. I think Orlando again and then Boston. And so it's going to be difficult. They're going to be pushed early. And so I'm interested to see just how they're going to handle that, how they're going to handle, again, just having those teams know that they're coming. What does that look like? I mean, I'm interested in a few of the position battles. Where does Jarris Walker fit in all of this? Does he get more of an opportunity to be in the rotation? I presume Benedict Mathurin is going to start the year as a sixth-man. We'll be interested to see if that changes long term. If he manages to play his way in the starting role, and what's going to take for him to do that. But I think those are kind of a lot of it. I think is going to be answered early on, and I'm not sure how much is going to be answered in camp.
Dustin, Rick Carlisle had mentioned earlier this week on our morning program, the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy, that the league has essentially, told all of the teams that they're going to start shifting and I'm kind of paraphrasing what Carlisle said, but basically what he was insinuating was that the NBA is going to start moving more towards, from an officiated standpoint and et cetera, a FIBA style of play, which is one that allows a little more physical play. Probably the whistle gets swallowed a little bit more. If you realistically look at that, this is like when I work in racing, and we are at a racetrack and there's rain in the forecast, every single driver goes, well, I prefer it in the rain. I love racing in the rain. I love it. It's, because that's an advantage for me. And deep down, all of them are like, man, I hate it. So is every team going to say that they feel like this benefits them, or does it truly benefit Indiana if they are allowed to play more physically?
I think, I don't know. I mean, I think if you're them, you'd rather get to the free throw line. I think it helps certain guys. I think basically they know they have to play more physical, and like Aaron Nesmith will be happy to hear that. Andrew Nembhard will be happy to hear that. They are guys that like to get in and get physical with people, and they'd like to be able to do that without constantly being called for fouls and sending guys like Giannis and LeBron to the line. So those guys are going to be happy about it. On like grand scale, I don't know if it helps them because I think they want to get rewarded for going to the rim. I mean, obviously, I think Halliburton, I'm certain, is not going to be happy about it, because he doesn't feel like he gets enough calls as is. He feels like he drives to the rim and gets fouled and doesn't get to go to the line nearly as much. He would point out his free throws numbers the last couple of seasons. If Halliburton tells you, I'm fine with this, there's a good chance he'll tell you off the record, like, no, I hate it because I already don't get to the line enough, and I think I deserve to go to the line more. And if they're going to swallow their whistle more, that means, you're going to take away opportunities from me when I'm driving and, get bumped off and feel like I should go to the line. So, I mean, I'm going to say more that it hurts them more than it helps them because I think they like the free throws. They like to attack the rim. They like to get going downhill. And, there are some guys, Halliburton in particular, that can get bumped off his line going to the rim. And it's just, so if he's not going to get fouled for that, if he's not going to get rewarded for attacking, and he's kind of going to get penalized for being, pushed around at the rim, then that's ultimately a loss, I think, for them in the long term. I think there are certain guys that would be happier. Again, I think they have to play physical, and it's probably better for them to be rewarded for playing physical. But I think the ultimate loss in capacity, like if it leads to them getting fewer free throws, even if they foul less, I think it'll probably cost them more than it helps them.
Dustin Topurek is our guest, covers the Pacers for the Indy Star. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. His current article out, Rick Carlisle pushes Pacers to make sure continuity doesn't lead to stale camp. In the piece, Dustin, you highlight the fact that the article and the construction of the article itself for the team is 2023 was a mixed bag of opportunities for a wide variety of positions on this roster. And now in 2024, there are clear areas where continuity is set up, where perhaps your rotation is pretty much set in stone. But you also mentioned the piece, a way to keep things fresh for Carlisle having these one-on-one tournaments, if you will, where guys like Jarris Walker and Benedict Mathurin wind up doing very well and winning those little mini games in camp. Let's stick with the latter in Benedict Mathurin. The biggest question I have for him this year is he able to take a big enough leap defensively to where he can earn himself a starting spot in this rotation? How close is he to that point? Do you think he can get there this season? Or do the Pacers value him so much as an off-the-bench scorer that it really doesn't matter where he ends up playing, be it starter, as long as the minutes and the opportunity late in games are there?
Yeah, I mean, I have my doubts, and it's less because of him than it is because of the guys that are ahead of him. I mean, I think they obviously eventually shook up the lineup last year right around Christmas to, basically to focus on defense. And one of the ways they did that was get Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith in the starting lineup together. And really, for the past 2 seasons, those have been their most reliable perimeter defenders. And so now that they've done it for 2 years, they've guarded everybody. Nesmith and Nembhard have, and usually Nembhard's getting the smaller guy, and Nesmith is getting some of the bigger power forwards, your LeBron James and stuff like that, and Giannis and Durant and everybody. But I think it's just going to be hard to walk away from having those 2 guys in the starting lineup when they've shown you can at least reasonably trust them. If you all of a sudden decide, okay, I'm going to try to get Benedict Mathurin to do what Aaron Nesmith has been doing for the last 2 seasons. I think that's going to be a big lift, and I'm not sure. I know he has the physical tools, but even if you feel like, okay, he's made a lot of strides, can he make strides to the point of feeling like you trust him at least enough to take off a guy who's been handling those assignments for 2 years and building on that, just building on that experience and giving you enough offensively? I mean, Nesmith doesn't have the same one-on-one skills and the ability to just go get you 20, 25 like Mathurin does, but he can get you 12 to 15 and hit some big threes and give you enough. And so it's like, I have a hard time seeing, especially if they say they're going to focus on defense, walking away from the guy that might have been your most effective defender the last 2 years. I mean, and Nembhard's right there with them. It's probably 1A and 1B, but you have enough scoring with Halliburton, Siakam, and Turner in that lineup that having Nesmith and Nembhard is what gives you balance. It's what makes sure that you don't overdo it, basically, and sacrifice defense for scoring. So, I mean, he's still going to make a big impact, even if he is their 6th man, even if it's their kind of leading scorer on that second unit. That's where I think he'll start the year. The hard part is, I think long term he needs to beat out one of those 2 guys, be at least as good on defense or close to it. And I just think that's a big lift because, again, these guys have been taking on these assignments for 2 years. He's occasionally guarded some good players, but Nesmith and Nembhard, it's been night in and night out. Every time that you're putting together your defensive game plan, it's all right, who's Nembhard guarding, who's Nesmith guarding? So if you take one of those guys out of the equation, it really shakes up the balance a lot. And again, I get it because Mathurin, I really think Mathurin's going to have a good year. He looks great. He's bounced around. He looks competitive as all get out. I think he's really put a lot into, figuring out how to be a better fit on offense in terms of, making quicker decisions, not kind of slowing him down and trying to ISO guys because he does so frequently rely on that one-on-one skill that sometimes he gets out of, what the Pacers' identity is, which is moving the ball, playing fast. Sometimes he wants to set a guy up and drive on him and embarrass him, basically, that's kind of what Mathurin likes to do, and they've had to push him into being a guy who fits better, and I think he will. I think he's going to have a really good year, but I think with their total balance, I think it's hard to move, again, Nembhard or Nesmith out of your starting lineup. And certainly, Siakam and Turner and Halliburton are even more entrenched in that lineup. So I just don't, at the moment, I don't see Carlisle, again, if he's going to focus on defense, if it's going to matter to him and he's not going to just give up and try to score 150 points a night, just taking one of those 2, reliable defenders out of the starting 5.
Dustin Dopirak is our guest. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. You can read his work covering the Pacers with the Indianapolis Star. Dustin, one of the storylines, it kind of felt like a Friday news dump to an extent. And for those that don't know what that means, that's when, companies like drop a bombshell at 5 p.m. on a Friday because everybody's off doing other stuff and doesn't notice it, and it's safe that way. That wasn't the case here, but the signing of Jahlil Okafor to me is intriguing because this is a player that was an all-NBA rookie performer. I know that he's an older player, but he is a big, and he has experience in the NBA. He goes overseas. He's been out of the league for 3 years. This is his comeback, and Indiana's the one that signs him. Does he have a legitimate chance to make and thus impact this roster?
Not right now. He's not in camp. They obviously signed a bunch of guys and waived them pretty immediately. So those are all your Exhibit 10 guys, and basically they're signed for the purpose of being on the Mad Ants. So obviously, if for the Mad Ants he dominates.
So okay, so when they signed him, what was the rationale then? I guess I should say.
So I haven't really extracted that from everybody, but so they've obviously got a bunch of these guys who get signed on. Like an Exhibit 10 deal is this, technically it's a camp deal. But what it what it does is if you're on an Exhibit 10 and you spend so many days on that team's G League roster, you get a bonus of, I think it's $75,000, somewhere in that range. So basically, like, being an Exhibit 10 versus a regular G League contract is a big deal. But you technically sign the Exhibit 10 deal with the big club. But, when they actually release the camp roster, Okafor's not on it. So the only guy so Cole Swider is the only kind of new guy, kind of bottom, I don't want to say, bottom level, but, one of those guys that they signed well after the draft. Swider is the only one that's actually on the camp roster. Okafor might show up for a day to technically kind of fulfill the requirements of the Exhibit 10. So him and I think Josiah Jordan-James, there's a few of those other guys, like Dakota Mathias, some other guys they had on Summer League, got these Exhibit 10s. And so, they'll be, Mad Ants guys. Now, the purpose would be, if he's coming back to the United States and you think he has a shot, well, you want to get him in he's still in your program, like he's still in your minor league team. So it's the same as like in baseball. Basically, there might be a guy who goes and plays in Korea or Japan or something like that for a couple of years, and you bring him back and he starts on a minor league contract, and maybe after that, maybe he performs really well in AA, AAA, and you move him up. It's not in the position of they're trying to, throw him in this mix with Wiseman and Jackson and take some of their time away in camp. It's okay. This guy is going to start with the Mad Ants, and what happens, basically. I mean, if he goes down there and dominates that, great. If he's just a really good player for your G League team, that works okay as well. It's just, if he's in your camp, you're the guy who gets to see what he becomes. And, again, you're putting low risk on this. And imagine, obviously, Okafor had to sign up for this and be okay with the idea that he was going to start with the Mad Ants, that, it wasn't going to be a true camp opportunity for him. But again, you get to play. You're going to get to play.
Everything
games.
okay with the doggy? What's the doggie's name, Dustin?
It's Maxine. We've discussed Maxine.
Maxine's made an appearance before, right? Now I know
she has made several.
Zach Osterman also. What kind of dog is Maxine?
Maxine's a beagle.
That would have been my guess based on the bark.
I think you mentioned
based on the bark alone.
So there's a squirrel there's a squirrel like 9 miles away, right? And Maxine is aware of it, correct?
There are very rogue cats in my neighborhood. They're all over the place.
Now,
yeah, they're like we have a cat, and she does not understand why our cat stays in the house and everybody else's cat is allowed to go wherever he or she wants. That bothers her. Maxine's like, what? No, you should have rules, cat. There should be rules for you. So I think that's
how old is Maxine?
She is 4.
Okay, Maxine sounds like a sweet girl, right?
She is.
And you said you have a cat also?
Yes, we have a cat.
And Maxine and the cat get along?
It's a very Garfield Odie situation.
So you're John Arbuckle. That's what we're getting at here, right?
Something like that.
How about that for a deep cut, Dustin? You're proud of that, aren't you?
I kind of am. Yes, exactly.
Hey, one of the guys, by the way, before and please give Maxine a pat for me. But the other one I wanted to get to, and I've mentioned this before, I am equally fascinated, to be honest with you, with the signing of James Wiseman, because this is one that, to me, he feels like what you thought he was going to be was an Isaiah Jackson type player. And by that, I mean a very athletic, active around the basket, big, but it hasn't necessarily stuck for him in the NBA. It is a flyer. There's probably no doubt about that. But is there going to be a place for him if he starts to show that he's got something there? The question is, are there even places for him to crack the rotation in Indiana, or is he strictly the emergency type player?
I mean, I imagine kind of connecting it to kind of the Okafor discussion. Obviously, he starts a rung up than Okafor does because, again, he's obviously stayed in the NBA this entire time, had some production, obviously not nearly as productive as you want from the number 2 pick in the draft. But, I don't know, he shot, 56, 58% somewhere in Detroit last year. He's going to get a crack at it. You presume Isaiah will start as the backup center. But, again, he has an opportunity because of who he's replacing. Jalen Smith was really the guy who was the number 2 for most of last year. So Jackson moves up kind of into that number 2 spot. Wiseman is kind of in number 3. But there could be opportunity. Obviously, if he outperforms Isaiah Jackson, in camp, and he's dealing with the groin thing right now, so he's not doing a whole lot. But in camp, in preseason, early parts of the season, if Jackson struggles, he's going to have the opportunity to step into those minutes. If Jackson has, misses some time with any injury, you end up using 3 centers, for a lot of time. Obviously, we've seen the last couple of years that both Jackson and Smith played a lot. Each of them got dinged up from time to time. So there will probably be opportunity when you're a big guy, when you're playing in the middle. There's going to be it's going to get physical. You're going to ding up a knee or an ankle or something like that. So there's going to be a chance for him to get real minutes. And I think he's going to come without some of the baggage. Obviously when you're the number 2 pick and you're in Golden State, the way he was, it comes with a lot of expectation. I mean, he's going to be dealing with a lot less expectation. Nobody's expecting him to carry the franchise. No one is expecting him to justify anything more than a veteran minimum. And that I think just takes a lot of pressure off. And it also is a situation where he doesn't have to think about, can he be the centerpiece to this organization? He doesn't have to be. It's just, can he be effective enough to be a backup center for Miles Turner? That's the question. Or can he just even be a third guy that fits in with Jackson as a backup? I mean, he doesn't have to do a whole lot to justify the signing. They just desperately needed a third guy, and he's a big man that can do it. So, again, obviously he's got opportunity. If he takes every chance he gets and turns it into something more, it could lead to something, in the long term. Again, I think they intend to re-sign Miles Turner next year, and I think Turner intends to take them up on that. But it's another body that becomes part of the equation. That if he steps up this year, if one of the two goes in another direction, obviously he could be part of the equation going forward. So we'll see what shakes out. But again, being the third center brings with it enough opportunity that he will get a chance to show something this year.
Pacers beat writer for the Indy Star, Dustin Dopirak, is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Dustin, if we wind the clocks back a year, the conversation about TJ McConnell from Rick Carlisle was he loves TJ, but he didn't know where a place would be. I'm paraphrasing slightly here. He didn't know where a place would be in the rotation for him. He obviously winds up being the most significant contributor on this team a year ago. Could have been sixth man of the year. There's conversation to be that. Who is that player this year? Who is that player for the Pacers?
Okay, run it back.
Who's the player this year that you would look at and say there's not a place for them in this rotation, but is actually going to surprise people in 24-25?
I mean, I guess the only one it could be would be Walker. I guess. I mean, or Shepard. I think you basically come into this looking and saying, okay, there's basically 12 guys that are a part of this. Wiseman is exactly kind of what I just said he is, that center is a position where you end up using 3 more often than you do it at other positions, and there's not really, I don't want to say there's not position flexibility, but you got to be big to play the 5, where you can move guys around at the 2, 3, and 4 to make it work. I mean, you have a specific number of guys that can play the 5. So basically, I would say there's 12 guys that you look at and say that those could be rotation guys. I mean, maybe Johnny Furphy could play himself into that situation if he's just really good at camp. And I think it's probably just going to be a year of him watching and learning and taking the occasional opportunity. But if you say, okay, right now, who do I think is outside looking in that can end up being and making an impact, is probably Walker, just because I think you kind of look at it and say, okay, well, he has to unseat Shepard. Even though Walker was the higher drafted guy, probably has the higher ceiling as a player. He probably, Shepard is a guy that got playoff minutes last year, that got a playoff start last year. Once Halliburton was out in the Boston series, you kind of think he comes in with a little bit of the advantage of having more experience from last season, and Walker has a chance to break his way into it. Obviously, I think it's obviously a good sign that he was in the finals of those one-on-one tournaments the first 2 days that he got there playing against Mathurin. He looks like he's in really good shape to me. But it's basically it's kind of 3 guys, I guess, for 2 spots. Basically, you look at Toppin as the 4, McConnell as the 1 in that second unit, and basically it's Shepard, Mathurin, and Walker for the 2 and the 3. And I just presume that Mathurin is a sure bet to get one of those spots, and you basically have those 2 rookies from last year fighting it out. And basically, I can think whoever wins is that guy. But again, you also wouldn't look at them and say, okay, well, one of those guys is the outside guy looking in. The math is not the same. Last year, the reason McConnell was out of that rotation was they had to kind of move Nembhard to be backup point guard. Now that you can move him into being a starter, that's why McConnell's now up there. So I don't know that there's necessarily a direct analog, but if you say, okay, like who is the 11th guy right now? I would probably say it's Walker, and I think he obviously has a chance to play his way into the rotation, so he's making an impact.
Dustin Dopirak and Maxine on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Look forward to talking to you over the course of the season, Dustin. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks as always, guys.
Appreciate it. Dustin Dopirak from the Indianapolis Star. Last night I watched, concluded the documentary of Will Ferrell, where he went to a Pacer game with his friend Harper, Will and Harper on Netflix. Really enjoyed it. I enjoy road trips. You guys know that. So I figure we're going to take one next. On to Jacksonville to find out what's going on with the Jags. Our friend JP Shadrick joins us as part of our Thursday road trip next. JP Shadrick is our friend in Jacksonville. He is with Jaguars.com. So we will go down to Jacksonville. He might be actually out getting a Maxwell House coffee, which I would not blame him at all if he is.
Thought we established earlier he didn't have to go very far to do that. I thought you could just breathe the air and you automatically had the coffee already.
That's right. I'm telling you. I like Jacksonville, man. Like,
I don't have anything against Jacksonville.
You know, it's an interesting community because it's so spread out and all of the different beaches. And then you have and by the way, we just reached out to JP. This does happen every once in a while and didn't get through. So we'll check back with him here in a second. But it's just like if you were to pick, Jimmy, an area that you think would be cool to live in that is not overly expensive, but the weather would be good and you can still kind of get some amenities of living a city life, where would you go? Because I think that's what Jacksonville offers to people. You got a beach. It's spread out, but you have an NFL team, so you got something to do there.
Because every other place I would mention in Florida, Miami, Naples, Fort Myers, I would assume is far more expensive than Jacksonville.
Correct. And like, so I think it offers, and I mean, it's not terrible in the wintertime. I mean, it's not Miami, but, I think it would be a pretty desirable place to live. But joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line from Jaguars.com is JP Shadrick, part of our Thursday, or he is our Thursday road trip. JP, I'll get right to this. I know that it has not gotten off to the start that the Jaguars wanted. That goes without saying. But is this a team that is reeling, or is this a team that it feels like is really just a step or two away from getting things in the right direction?
Well, yeah, first off, it's good to be back with you. Second, the blowout on Monday night was the one that got away from him. I mean, that horse got out of the stable. There was no catching it, I mean, there was no chance in Buffalo the way that thing was going. The other three games, they've had opportunities. They had the lead, and they had a chance to go up 3 scores week 1 in Miami. Travis Etienne fumbles the ball at the 2. The next play, it's a touchback. The next play, it's an 80-yard touchdown for Tyreek Hill. And even through all that, the Jags still had the lead, but couldn't hang on to it. The defense just ran out of gas. The offense just did nothing after that point. They couldn't move the football. And even in the other 2 games this year, the Browns game, I mean, the offense just hasn't been able to make connections down the field. Trevor's been overthrowing some balls. We saw the bad interception on Monday night, of course, against the Bills, where he threw it to Hamlin with Brian Thomas wide open. And there was a couple of those misses last week, too, where the offense, again, Jaguars had the lead. Defense actually was playing well in the second half and getting C.J. Stroud off the field. But then that one last drive, he kind of keeps him on the field and gets him in the end zone for the go-ahead score. So it's not – I don't think it's meltdown mode yet, for lack of a better term. But it's not feeling good, I'll say that. But they know that a couple plays here or there, and they'd have a much better record than they are right now.
Well, so then, JP, the extra layer to that question would be, are they closer to the team that gets beat basically at the death against the Texans, or are they closer to the team that got routed by Buffalo?
I feel like it's a team that's closer in close games most of the time. I mean, I think they were just outgunned in Buffalo. I mean, those guys were built a little bit different, certainly that night, that environment, everything that went into that game. It was pretty bad from the start. But they feel like, I mean, they've got the pieces to go do it. And they've got wide receivers that can play. They've got the tight end. We'll see if Evan Ingram's coming back this week. They aren't really sure yet. He's trying to work through it this week. That would be nice to have him back if they can. They've run the ball okay last week, overall at least. And then on defense, there are some injuries there, but they've kind of held things together when things are getting weird on offense. I mean, even with backup linebackers playing and a backup nickel and, all these, maybe we'll see about Josh Hines-Allen, not much pass rush. Okay, they've been able to at least keep the team in 3 of the games this year. And now they don't have a takeaway yet. That's one thing they can do better as well. So I feel like, to answer your question, it's closer to the team that should be in games and should win some of these games at some point. It just hasn't really gone their way yet, but it's of their own doing. If they go make plays and execute on offense and hit open players and block the right guy, they're probably winning 3 of these games.
Has Trevor Lawrence regressed?
Feels like a little bit. I mean, if you're missing open guys that you're supposed to hit and – the time clock's moved up a little bit. I wonder where his confidence is right now. I think you got to kind of get him going. And he's a kind of a flatline personality guy. He's not one that's going to throw his helmet on the sideline and get in guys' faces and do all that stuff. But I'm curious how he is behind the scenes, like behind closed doors. But to answer your question, yeah, and obviously, clearly the numbers are not what they should be. And if you're missing open receivers that should be hit, then something's amiss there. Whether it's eyes are coming down with pressure, because the O-line's had some inconsistencies this year, or just missing throws. I mean, so there's something there. Hopefully he can work through it early in the season. He's still a young guy. He's getting paid a lot of money, though, for being a young guy. That's why the microscope's on him.
I mean, have the JP Shadrick, our guest from Jags.com, down in actually Jaguars.com, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, in Jacksonville. Have the mechanics of Trevor Lawrence changed? Has the personnel around him changed? I thought this was Peyton Manning Part 2. I just did. And there were moments where it looked like that was going to come to fruition. And now I've got concern for him.
He does kind of get those choppy feet, when Peyton would do it, right?
Oh, yeah.
You could tell things were getting kind of weird when he would just chop those feet, right? But he would also throw it away and live to fight another down, right? Trevor at times a lot of times has tried to play the hero. Hey, I can throw this ball in this window. Oh no, I can't. It's an interception, right? And I'm going back to last year now with some of this stuff. So there's a little bit of that, and I think it's just a collective. It's him certainly, but it is a collective offensive issue too. When the left tackle's a spinning top for a couple games, and there's guys coming at him, he can't help but look down, and then all of a sudden, guys are on him. And to your point about the personnel, there are 2 new receivers here: Brian Thomas Jr., draft pick, Gabe Davis, brought in from Buffalo. And Christian Kirk was dinged up a little bit and has kind of been missing in action for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season until last week. And Everett Ingram's been hurt. So there are some new pieces out there as well.
The area Indianapolis most needs to exploit of Jacksonville to win this game, the area where Jacksonville is most susceptible.
It's a great one. I really think this Jaguars defense has a lot of new faces out there, right? Especially at linebacker. And, Ventrell Miller is his first year on the field, had an Achilles injury last year, missed the whole rookie season. He's playing for Foye Oluokun, who's out for a few more weeks. The guy who led the league in tackles for about 3 years in Atlanta and in here, so he's out. We'll see what Devin Lloyd's doing this week. He should be back, it feels like. If not, Chad Muma will get some time there. But if you got those guys out there, then, that they've shown at least some vulnerabilities in the passing game. And the Jags pass rush has not been able to get home. So the edge players, especially Trayvon Walker, has been a little quiet lately. The interior hasn't been great. So if there's a running game for Indy, and you can exploit that over the middle play action stuff, I think that's, where the Jaguars have had some issues, at least in personnel, with injuries on the injury report.
All right, lastly, just with a number, JP, 1 to 10, 10 being the most, 1 being the least. Doug Peterson's seat is how hot?
5.5.
Okay. 5.5.
5.5.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens.
See how the next few weeks go.
I was going to say.
Against Indy this week, and then London 2 weeks in a row, Bears, Patriots. Let's come off that trip, and then you can ask me again later.
The problem is in London, that 5.5 becomes a 7 with the conversion. That's the challenge there. But,
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. JP, we appreciate it, man. Short notice, I realize. Appreciate the time, and we'll definitely be talking to you over the course of the season.
You got it, guys. Anytime, man.
It's our buddy JP Shadrick down in Jacksonville. Again, we have tickets to give away. Billy Joel, Sting. You know the call to action. When you hear a song coming out of a break that is Police or Sting, either one, that's your cue to call, and we will get you to Lucas Oil Stadium on February 8th.
thing for you that is a little bit more national than we would generally.
Okay.
But you know me as the resident Yankees fan, and I want to make sure I'm not alone in this. And Eddie posed this question to me last night. The Houston Astros are now gone. They're gone from the MLB playoffs.
Correct.
It ends a string of 7 straight ALCS appearances for them in a sport with so much parity-filled, who knows what's going to happen, postseason level drama for them to have done that. Incredible accomplishment. I've been over them since the trash can fiasco. Yes, I'm somewhat sour grapes. I don't like the Houston Astros. I'm not afraid to admit it. I celebrated the Detroit Tigers knocking them down. Are they the proverbial boogeyman of baseball as it stands the last 5-7 years? And do you think there's other people that are as happy as me that they're gone?
No, not just baseball, Jimmy.
You're saying all of sport.
All
Okay.
of sports. The NFL, the NBA,
They
MLB.
are the most hated.
Are they? Is the question.
No, because they are in the sport that people care the least about.
Fair?
I mean, within baseball, maybe, but I don't think that the animosity or of impropriety with the Houston Astros, it was a big deal, and don't get me wrong, and you're neither of you are wrong, right, in terms of the level for it and the fatigue for them, but you cannot measure it in that aspect. I would make the argument that there is more fatigue. Now, there is more fatigue, but also there's more fatigue about the Kansas City Chiefs or the Golden State Warriors in this country than there are the Houston Astros. Now, likewise, there's also more love for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Golden State Warriors than the Houston Astros. You got what I'm saying?
Just by metrics and eyeballs alone.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you were to stop, this would be my measuring stick by which I go with these things. If you were to stop 1,000 people on the Las Vegas Strip and say, okay, we're going to play word association, and they say, okay, and you say, here we go. You ready? And they go, yes. And you say, professional sports team hated due to scandal. I think the New England Patriots would come up before the Houston Astros. Scandal, the word scandal maybe changes it because of the fact, but I think that like the baseball steroid, if you said like baseball scandal, I think people would mention Barry Bonds before the Houston Astros. They'd mention Mark McGwire before the Houston Astros. They'd mention maybe even like the Ohtani gambling thing, maybe, Pete Rose. I don't know. Like, I think that for whatever reason, and the Astros, what they were doing and their accomplishment, to your guys' point, is really remarkable. The sustained level of success that they've had is remarkable, and in particular because they're a franchise that bottom scaled it down, cleaned house, and then built it all the way up with these young players that, for the most part, were pretty likable and excitable until you found out about the trash can, home run signal calling, and all of that. But even with that, it is kind of weird that they're like the most anonymous dynasty ever. You know what I mean? Like, you don't go, you walk. I'm in airports 40 times a year. I don't see people walking around wearing Astros hats and T-shirts. And maybe it's because of the reason you mentioned, Jimmy, right? Maybe but have you ever really met an Astros fan? Have you ever met anybody that's like, oh man, I'm like.
I mean, I have a buddy from high school that was an Astros fan, but no, large sample size on the street. No, I'm not running into them all the time.
Like it's Houston in general. I think the Astros very like symbolically represent perfectly the city of Houston, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. Houston is the third largest metropolitan area in the United States, maybe fourth. I think it's third or fourth. Very few people. If you stopped 100 people on the street and said, name for me the 10 biggest cities in the country, virtually everybody's going to throw out New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, okay? But then people would throw out Philadelphia before they mention Houston. They'd throw out Atlanta before they mention Houston. They'd throw out, like, probably San Francisco before they mention Houston.
Dallas
before they mention Houston. Like, it's literally this massive metroplex. And I've said before, the city of Houston, if you were to take Keystone at the Crossing, where you have a mall and then like 5 hotels and some business parks or whatever else, and if that was a droplet of water that you drop a droplet of water and it creates that in the middle of a desert, basically, okay? If you were to take a paintbrush and then just flick it onto dirt, and like 1,000 of those little Keystone at the Crossings popped up over the span of a 40 square mile area, that's Houston. That's what it looks like. And I like it. I genuinely like the city of Houston. I loved when I'd go down and cover the Texans games. I liked when IndyCar raced down there. I like Houston. But it is weird that for a team that has been that good, the Detroit Tigers went to multiple AL CSs and whatever else over the last 10 or 15 years in the Verlander peak era and everything else, and never won a World Series. And yet I think people think of the Tigers as being almost more like up there than the Astros. They were just kind of this random team.
Maybe it is the animosity, because there's a lot of New York fans, and I get it. Look, this is the wrong market in a broad baseball term. No one cares about this next sentiment, but no one feels bad for the Yankees. Totally get that. I don't expect you to. Why would you? They have the winningest franchise in the history of major sports here in America. But they had a young group of players in 2017. A lot of people felt like were robbed of a World Series because of what happened with the sign-stealing scandal. So there's inherent animosity to me towards the Astros. That said, the dominance they had the last half-decade plus of just being the boogeyman that's always there in the ALCS, that's always going to have an opportunity to win a World Series, it's a credit, Jake, as you mentioned, to what they were able to build with Bregman and Jose Altuve and just that entire lineup year over year. So it's an incredible accomplishment for Houston. I think they're more recognized than maybe we give them a bit credit for. That said, I'm not sad to see them go.
Jake, I was 6 outs away from joining you in our beer bet for the Major League Baseball playoffs from having half of our teams eliminated.
So my two teams, so again, to recap, so I have, but here's the thing, I think I still have two stout ones left. But I have Baltimore gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had the
Braves.
The Braves also gone, right?
Yes.
Now, I still have alive
Philly,
and the Tigers, right?
Yes, sir.
Who had the Brewers?
I have the Brewers.
Okay. That was actually pretty cool last night.
That was really cool.
I
texted Joel Erickson after the game.
I did too. I spoke it into existence, and I told him that because I was in a group chat with a couple buddies, and I said, hey, look, this is sad because we're not going to see Devin Williams in the 9th inning and after tonight because Milwaukee's about to lose.
Here's what I'd like to know. And I'm genuinely curious of this. And people can text me the answer at 523-9288.
317 area code.
That's correct.
The slide schooler.
And by the way, Marcus. Congratulations, Marcus, who has won the tickets and is on his way. He knew that Every Breath You Take was Sting and the Police and was caller number 4 during that discussion. So, Marcus, you are on your way. Congratulations to go see Billy Joel and Sting February 8th at Lucas Oil Stadium. 523-9288 is my cell phone number. I'm genuinely curious of this. Am I underselling the Major League Baseball playoffs and in notably like the nuances in which you guys are talking in terms of how actively right now fans in Indianapolis are paying attention to it? I think to a lot of people, for me, so I guess the two options here are this. Are you like me, which is I enjoy it because it's a viewing option, but it's kind of like when the World Cup is on or the Olympics where like it's like, oh, that's cool. Like there's something to have on, and I'm half paying attention, but I'm not necessarily paying attention to who the direct at batter is or what the matchup is with the pitcher, whatever else. I'm kind of casually coming in and out, checking it, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. There's 2 outs and they're down a run. There's a man on first. I'm going to watch for a couple more minutes before I surf some more. Would you say most people are A, that, or B, they are like the two of you where they are paying attention to the matchups, the rotations, the rivalries, etc.?
I think most people are like A, but I would go a step further than what makes this show in terms of
C,
baseball
which would
conversation.
Be C, which would be nobody cares at all, right?
I wouldn't go that far. In terms of a baseball demographic split up here, I think we represent all 3 potential baseball fans right now. Jake, and if I miscategorize you here on the front end, I apologize. I would put you as the casual baseball fan that like isn't like you're not watching every single night during the regular season. You're maybe casually checking to stay in the know about the team that you follow. I represent the fan of, I'm a diehard Yankees fan. I watched over 100 of their games this year. It is something that's on the television for me every night. But in terms of the other stuff around the league, I'm really just looking at it from a peripheral, and I'll watch the playoffs. Eddie Garrison is the high-powered baseball fan of yesteryear that, yes, he loves his Reds, but he's watching everything, and he can get lost in a baseball game on a Tuesday night and be infatuated with it.
Yes, that's right.
I think we make up the 3 general fans. The only fan we don't have is the guy that does not care about baseball at all, thinks it's dumb, and doesn't want to see it anymore.
Which I think is a high percentage around.
Sure.
Honestly. I mean,
across the state of Indiana, do you think there are more people watching the Brewers-Mets game tonight or the Falcons-Buccaneers game tonight?
Falcons-Buccaneers, by far.
Yeah.
Not close. Not close.
I agree with you 100%. It just based on the 100-pound gorilla in the room being the NFL. Yeah, I bet they still get blown away, even though
How
baseball
many
has
people are
seen
playing
numbers.
fantasy baseball?
Well, fantasy baseball's over now. The playoffs have
But
started.
I'm saying,
Yeah,
everyone plays fantasy
baseball
football, right?
has.
Yeah.
It bugs me because I still love the game, not to the extent that Eddie does, but friends of mine will say and trash baseball and talk about, oh, it's the ratings tank and everything. Year over year, they have seen increases as they've modified the rules of the game with pitch clock and shortening games where you'd be there for 4 hours and now you're there for 2:15, 2.5. But NFL is still king, and yeah, that's not going to be close on the ratings numbers tomorrow.
NFL is the big giant, no question about it. And the guy that's the voice of the local team of it, Matt Taylor, is going to join us top of the hour. Matt Taylor is the voice of the Indianapolis Colts. Joins us, as you just heard, courtesy of Shelby Materials on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line for our conversation previewing the Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars coming up on Sunday down in Florida. Matt, we'll begin with this as we do each week, and that is kind of the health report. Anything new to report, notably Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson, or for that matter, any others that jump out at you?
Yeah, the only thing of note so far, the Colts are currently practicing right now, so we'll know more in a couple hours here. But Jonathan Taylor did meet with reporters today and said that he's not going to practice again today. So that's Wednesday and Thursday he will have missed, and he's at the point of his career, obviously, where he could potentially practice just Friday, be more of a game time decision on Sunday, and then end up playing. We'll see how it goes, but you got a lot of important pieces on both sides of the ball that are really banged up right now. You got the loss of Tyquan Lewis, who's on IR, so that means it's next man up along the defensive line, and that defensive line that was so deep and such a strength going into the season is starting to get a little thin just in terms of manpower and number of bodies lost. So health it's huge on both sidelines in this game. The Jaguars are real banged up. They're going to be probably without their top three defenders in this game. We'll see where Josh Hines-Allen is, but they're going to be playing without Foye Oluokun. They're down Tyson Campbell. So injuries are a big storyline in Week 5 already.
I'm going to list for you, Matt, and we did this earlier, Jimmy and myself. I'm going to list for you some players, and I want you to tell me which one you think actually is the most critical for them to get back on the field, okay? And I mean, Taylor and Richardson, it kind of goes without saying, but between Kwity Paye, Kenny Moore, Ryan Kelly, Zaire Franklin was out with an illness. I'm going to take him off the list, but let's say Kelly, Moore, and Paye. I'm not asking you to say that any of them are not valuable, but the one that when you just look at scheme and depth that is the most critical for them to make sure is able to go.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you can make a case and an argument for all of them, but I guess if I got to pick one, I would answer with Kwity Paye. Last week I thought the Colts did a really good job in the secondary of being creative, and major kudos and tip of the cap to those guys. Guys like Chris Lamond and Samuel Womack, they really played well and steadied the ship without Kenny Moore II. So, again, not that you think you can get by without Kenny because he's a great player, but those guys, showed a lot of professionalism in their roles last week, I should say. But I think with Kwity, to have Kwity available in this game, that's important because you already lost Tyquan Lewis, and I'm not sure if he's going to be a guy that can come back this season. I know the Colts certainly hope that he can be. But again, you're just starting to test the limits of the depth along the defensive line, especially at defensive end. You're down Samson Ebicom, you're down Tyquan Lewis. Now you got guys up like Adam Gotsis, who I think is a really good player, but again, he's coming off the practice squad last week and then thrown into the fire. DeForest Buckner is going to miss at least the next 2 games still. So Kwitty's a really important player against the run. And setting the edge is really important when you play a team like the Jaguars. And what I mean by that is Trevor Lawrence historically against the Colts and a lot of other teams, so don't get me wrong, but they love to get him outside the pocket, and they love to roll him out of the pocket, and he's a really good outside the pocket passer. They flood a zone. They get Lawrence out in space.
Hey Matt, let me ask you this, and I'm sorry to do this, but explain to people what flood the zone means.
Yeah, you roll out and you get a couple of different receivers in different levels of the defense, right? So you have like a back out of the backfield in the near flat. You have an intermediate throw where maybe you have to throw it over the head of a linebacker, and then you got a guy going deep. So you flood one side of the field with 3 different options in different layers of the defense, one deep, one intermediate, and one shallow, and then you take what the defense is going to give you there. And you just can't give him the option to do that by letting him out the door, out of the pocket. And that's where a guy like Kwity Paye would come in and be really important this week. Lane integrity, pass rush lane integrity is always important, but especially when you have a dual-threat quarterback like Trevor Lawrence that seems to want to do that early in the game to establish some rhythm to establish some flow. Seemingly, the better he is throughout the course of the game is dictated by how he starts. And obviously that's not going well early. He's lost 9 straight losses individually. The Jaguars are really struggling on offense, right? Only putting up about 15 points per game. If they can make life difficult on Trevor Lawrence at the beginning of the game, I think the Colts can put the hammer down, create this shadow of doubt, like this here we go again mentality from the Jaguars. But I think Kwity Paye would be really big in that regard to keep Trevor Lawrence in the well, as they say, and make him be a pocket passer and get the push up the middle so that he can't get out.
By the way, Matt, hang on just a second. Eddie, go ahead and play the breaking news sounder. This just in, the Associated Press had awarded this previously, but now the WNBA itself has announced that Caitlin Clark is, in fact, the WNBA Rookie of the Year. It was not a unanimous selection. She was 1 vote shy of that, but Caitlin Clark, the Rookie of the Year by the WNBA. Matt Taylor is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, the voice of the Colts, talking about the Colts and Jaguars coming up on Sunday. Matt, another topic that we've talked a lot about, I want your perspective on this. I thought, and look, there is in no way, shape, or form is any of this meant as some sort of a slight on Ryan Kelly. But we know that Ryan Kelly is a veteran player that's towards the end of the career. That is a position that sometimes can be hard to find the right guy. One game does not a season make, does not a career make. But I thought in Ryan Kelly's absence that the Colts got really solid play at the center position from a young guy that had played it in college, but maybe not as the primary position for all 4 years. And I thought Bortolini was really, really good, but I wanted you to expand upon just his ability to step into that role.
Yeah, great point. I mean, he had 28 starts at Wisconsin. Half of them were at center. So he's kind of like that interior Swiss Army knife for the Colts. But in a pinch, he stepped up big. And what a journey it's been for him just within the last couple of weeks since the regular season started. He's been inactive the first 3 games. So they're asking a lot of him going into this 4th game, not knowing the health of Ryan Kelly, not knowing if he can, 100% play and gut through that neck injury. So I think he finds out maybe late Friday or Saturday that it's, high probability, likelihood that he's going to have to play. And he's going through everything for the first time in the regular season. And then, oh, by the way, there's freaking Cameron Hayward on the other side, who's played in literally 197 regular season games for the Steelers against a guy that I'm sure he was, coming on the airplane knowing that he's going to be facing a rookie that's making his first NFL start. He was probably licking his chops. But the Colts did a really good job, for all intents and purposes, neutralizing Hayward's ability to wreck the game. Still made his plays, but the Colts still ran up the middle very frequently, and the offensive line did a great job. They ran for 133 yards. Jonathan Taylor had another big day behind that offensive line, and I think the biggest compliment that the average fan can give a guy like Tanner Bortolini in that situation is you didn't notice him, right? You didn't call his name. You weren't saying, the Colts give up another sack up the middle. There's another sack from the center. You didn't notice him. So, you didn't say his name, which means he was playing at a high level. So talked to him the other day in the locker room, was really excited about his performance and said it was kind of a whirlwind thing for him. And that was kind of evidenced by, the way he celebrated that first touchdown and, sprinting up the sideline, giving high fives to his teammates, almost getting a little too top heavy there.
If they didn't time him in the 40 in the combine, they could have right then, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was going top speed now. That was impressive. He was jacked up, man. That's the true definition of adrenaline. So it was just the last week's game was just full of examples like that where guys stepped up. I mentioned Adam Gotsis. How about Dio Dangbo with a sack and a half? And the guys in the secondary with Womack and Lamont. So everybody just stepped up in a big way, and that was a true, all hands on deck type of win for the Colts last week.
Voice of the Colts, Matt Taylor, is our guest. He joined us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, and he's brought to us by Shelby Materials, the concrete and aggregate experts. Mayte, let's say Jonathan Taylor is unable to go this weekend. And to be clear, there's been no reports that that's going to be the case. It's just where the practice report is at and him not practicing today. At least that's the initial reports there. So let's say he's out, but Anthony Richardson is a go. We've talked about it the last couple weeks, having that leadership and all-pro level player in the backfield next to him certainly makes his job easier. When you're trying to get Anthony Richardson comfortable and you're trying to get him in a area where he feels like he can not only make mistakes but has guys to lean on in that growth, what changes and who steps up if Jonathan Taylor is unavailable on Sunday? How does that process change?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of different moving parts there. I mean, the next man up, the next men up in that case would be Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson. But I think the hypothetical that really changes things if both guys can't play, right? If Richardson and Taylor can't go, then it really changes your offensive approach. And then the Colts have to get really creative and I think throw the kitchen sink in terms of the running scheme at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They can't just rely on inside zone and outside zone and powers. It's got to be everything. It's got to be some misdirection stuff. It's got to be some whams. It's got to be some multiple guys in the backfield. You know, maybe you move back one of the tight ends who acts as a fullback to create some space in the running game. Because if you have Joe Flacco and, you know, the running back crew without Jonathan Taylor, again, you're going to have to be really, really creative in how you attack the Jaguars defense and how you try to move the ball on the ground, because it can't just be all about Flacco throwing the ball 40 times against the Jaguars defense that I know is depleted but still can make plays. So there's a lot of different puzzle pieces this week, and offensively you're still trying to marry the productive running game with Jonathan Taylor with a consistent passing game. And I thought the Colts took a good step forward in that direction last week with the playmaking ability from Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. I think those two guys combined for like 195 receiving yards on 14 catches last week. So they're going to need everything. So if Taylor can go, that's great. If Richardson can go, that's great. But if they can't, Flacco and Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson, they've got to be efficient in the ground game to the point where they can set themselves up in the third and manageable. Because if they're in, if the run is getting stuffed on first and second down, third and long is not the place you want to be with a pretty much immobile quarterback with Joe Flacco and a team that likes to blitz from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And one other thing to note in this whole dynamic is that Jacksonville has a new defensive coordinator. It's Ryan Nielsen. And last year he was in Atlanta, and we all remember how that Atlanta game went for the Colts. I think it was Christmas Eve. It didn't go well. That was arguably the worst offensive performance of the season for the Colts last year. I think they only scored 10 points. They were under 4 yards per play, and they got heated up a ton. So if the Colts have a non-Anthony Richardson quarterback in there, Gardner Minshew, or in this case maybe it's Joe Flacco, they're going to go back to a similar game plan that they had success with last year with that defensive coordinator really dominating the Colts in that week 16 or 17 game.
Matt, there was a lot of praise spoken about Pittsburgh offensively going into last week's contest, and rightfully so. It looked like Justin Fields had kind of righted his career, and then they were clicking at a lot of different levels, and the Colts, for one half of football, were really able to suffocate them. Pittsburgh breaks through in the second half. They're able to put some late scoring drives to the point that, I could hear it with you and Rick Venturi on the broadcast, like this is suddenly a high-powered, high-octane, this is what you dream of type of moment. Colts survive, they win, but back to that second half, what changed defensively? They're obviously shorthanded. There's injuries to that defense going in, and it's still a massive win for them, but what made things open up in that second half for Pittsburgh that, should they be shorthanded again this week, could potentially be exploitable?
Well, I think it just speaks to the overall issue that's still there for the Colts defensively. They've seemingly fixed in 2 weeks the rushing defense, right? The first two games were just way too overpowerful by the Texans and the Packers. I mean, 400 yards allowed in the first two games, completely unacceptable, and everybody will tell you that on that defensive side of the ball. But they've fixed some things, and I think they're averaging around 90 yards rushing in the last two games, which is a very winnable number. But the volume is still there. And by that, I mean, you're playing some offenses so far in the season that aren't going to be confused with prolific and high-powered, and you're still giving up, I think, right around 400 yards a game. And, again, it's to some quarterbacks that aren't established yet and some quarterbacks that historically haven't had those big games, right? Caleb Williams was making his third start. He had a decently big game, and the Bears had 395. Last week, Justin Fields, who had a good completion percentage going into the game. Well, he throws for over 300 yards against the Colts, and he does so for just the second time in his career. So there's some things that still need to be corrected, and the high volume number is being kind of offset the last two games that are both wins, by the way, by being more opportunistic and just more timely with the playmaking ability, right? You've got 8 sacks the last two games. You've got 5 takeaways combined the last two games, while only having 1 takeaway in the first 2 games of the season. So no coincidence that you've won the last 2 games, whereas, you lost the first 2. But I just don't think if you're going to be, again, you're last right now in total yards allowed and yards per game allowed. And I just don't think that's a winning number. At some point, that's going to catch up with you, because there's going to be a game where you don't get 2 and 3 takeaways, and those don't offset. They don't offset the game. They don't help keep the point total down. So those are things that still have to get corrected. I know the defensive side of the ball knows that. But yeah, those are some things. I mean, you're up 17-0, and you got a chance to close the game out and put your foot on the neck of your opponent. And they got back within a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, and it was a little bit too tight there for comfort. And so defensively, it's just you can't continue to live with that amount of production to the other team, and you're going to be playing some better offenses down the road. I know here, Miami's still banged up at quarterback. Who knows what's going on with Will Levis? Trevor Lawrence is struggling. So you're getting a break in that regard. But I always say, man, this is the NFL, and they've got good players on both sides of the ball every single week and some guys that can kill you. So the Colts defense has to shore those things up in order to win.
Matt, if you were to rank it, Matt Taylor is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. I got to thinking about this, and I think that you have a pretty enviable job for this reason. I don't know that there is another division in the league. Do the Titans have a mascot? Do you know that?
I don't think so,
okay.
No.
Is the AFC South the only division that has 3/4 of the teams actually have a mascot, which I find to be enviable that you get to go and see the other mascots, right? Jackson DeVille ranks pretty high, doesn't he?
I was going to say, Jackson DeVille, he's a staple. I don't know if they still do this, but they have him almost like on a zip line. He comes in from one of those. Yeah,
like Boomer, right?
Kind of like Boomer, yeah. They have him come in from the rafters. I think they've got a zip line that's attached to one of the big light towers they have in the stadium, like the stadium light towers. And he'll come in and he'll zoom in right in the middle of the stadium, and I don't know what he's doing. He's dropping off the game ball or whatever, but that's kind of cool. Then Houston has a guy by the name of Toro.
Toro's cool. I'm down with Toro. He's cool, right?
Yeah. And
nice
of course,
fella.
Blue is legendary.
Blue's an instigator. Toro's a little bit more friendly. Blue's an instigator, right?
Yeah, Blue can get a little gnarly now and again.
You got Sir Purr, and Carolina has Sir Purr, right?
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't know they had guys.
Let's not ignore Casey Wolf. I mean, come on.
Okay, I forgot about Casey Wolf in Kansas City. That's right.
He also does the rafter thing.
None of these people are the San Diego chicken, Jake. None of them.
Well, now it's just the famous chicken now because the San Diego folk got upset and there was some legal issues there. I don't know if you know that or not, right? Just the famous chicken now. Now,
really?
Yeah. There was a what's that?
Is he still active? Like if I go to mascotreference.com, is he still active, or is this all historical data?
Unfortunately, he actually was signed by the Tyson folk in Arkansas about 10 years ago, I think. so no, he is no longer active, I don't think. Now, hold on. Now, a couple of others, though. You got Ragnar in Minnesota. Now, that guy's kind of badass, right? He comes out like on a Harley, and that's an actual dude. And I knew a girl that worked at the high school where he was the dean of students. Can you imagine getting in trouble and Ragnar the Viking is coming to talk to you?
Oh wow, yeah. That's a mind screw right there, man.
And
how do you even react to that? Yeah.
Do you know the name of Baltimore's 3 mascots? There's a little trivia for you, Matt Taylor. They have 3 of them. They have 3 little ravens. Do you know their names? I kid you not.
Oh no.
I'm being totally serious here.
I know what they are now.
It's Edgar Allan and Poe.
Oh my gosh.
That's true.
I had no idea.
It really is real.
I'm being
it really
totally
is real.
serious. I'm being totally serious. But Jackson DeVille's cool is my point. But the problem is that for Jacksonville lately, for the team itself, the coming in on the zip line is the most exciting aspect of the game. But this has been obviously a team down there that has been a it has been difficult for Indianapolis. I guess, Matt, the question in simplicity would be, it doesn't matter. I mean, most of these players were not on the roster like for all of those games, but is this some sort of a mental hurdle for Indianapolis, as absurd as that sounds?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it really is inexplicable. I mean, because, and I say this all due respect, Jimmy, you'll appreciate this. I mean, I know you're a big Chiefs fan. It's not like Everbank Stadium down there is like playing in Arrowhead. It's not like playing in New England. I mean, again, it can get loud, and it's a good fan base.
The pool kind of undercuts it a little bit, you know? I mean, it's a whole different vibe there.
It's not going to be confused with like the most difficult place to play. I mean, I guess it gets hot down there, and maybe the Colts aren't used to the heat and the humidity. I don't know. I mean, that's me making excuses. But if you talk to the guys in the locker room, they'll tell you, like, it's not necessarily about Jacksonville. It's just about the Colts have, for whatever reason, they just play awful down there. I mean, it seems like it's whenever they go down there, whatever can go wrong does go wrong. And they have been beaten by some inexplicably bad teams. I mean, the game that immediately comes to mind is the 2021 regular season finale, right? When all the Colts have to do is beat a 2-win Jacksonville team, and I think they're favored by like 12 points, which is a huge point spread in the NFL, as we all know. And they don't even come close to winning that game. There was the 2020 game where they opened the season in Jacksonville. Gardner Minshew's the quarterback. The Colts lose, and then Jacksonville proceeds to lose 15 consecutive games, you know, the rest of the way in the season. There was the weird 2018 game down there where the Colts went for it a bunch on fourth down, and they couldn't do well in the red zone, and they lost that game 6-0, which is a bizarre score. There's just been a lot of inexplicable things. I mean, I looked it up the other day. In this 9-game losing streak to the Jaguars on the road, and one of these games is in London, so you have to kind of factor that into too. But in this stretch, the Colts have been outscored by 145 points, and they've lost 6 of the 9 games by 15 or more. And again, it's not like Jacksonville's been great, and it's not like they're historically good at home. I think since 2015, right, the last win for the Colts was 2014. Since 2015, the Jaguars are they have a 41% home winning percentage. And they've got 31 wins in that time at home. And almost a third of them are against the Colts.
It's crazy.
They're 9-0, obviously, in that time. It's crazy. I don't know if there's another, weird series, lopsided nature in the NFL going like this. Other than the Colts and Jags, but I know I'm tired of talking about it because I can't explain it, and I know obviously the guys inside the locker room are tired of hearing about it too because, like you guys said, none of them were here the whole time. They just, for whatever reason, haven't played well down there, and I know they'd like to erase all of that coming up on Sunday.
We'll see if it's erased on Sunday down in Jacksonville. We'll be listening to it as Matt Taylor is on the call. Matt, travel safe. We appreciate it. All right.
All right, guys. Thanks as always.
All right, Matt Taylor joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. As we just mentioned, if you're just joining us on the program.
Where have you been?
Thank you. Big news involving the city of Indianapolis and one of its prominent athletes, and we will break down for you exactly what all it means in comparison to what we had heard a week ago next. to stun people. I realize when I say this, because, I mean, it took me 7 times to pass algebra. Sometimes I get confused by, and look, I think it's great. Obviously, the big announcement today that Caitlin Clark is the WNBA Rookie of the Year. But then my first thought was, wait a minute, I thought we knew this and had heard this previously, but there is a difference, and this is kind of the big one. Joining us now to help sort it all out on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line from the Next Hoops, where he covers the Indiana Fever, also covers the Pacers for SI Pacers, Forbes, and WTHR, amongst others. Tony East, friend of the show, joins us on short notice, which I appreciate, Tony. First off, let's begin with this. The difference in terms of the voters between the Associated Press Award, which Caitlin Clark was named Rookie of the Year on the 22nd of September, and then today's announcement is what?
Yeah, there's AP voters who do their own awards every year. It's usually pretty similar to the W Awards, and it's like not an insignificant deal, especially in the W space before when there wasn't as much coverage. A couple years ago, they had Sam Thomas on their all-rookie team instead of FIBA rookie Queen Egbo, which led to some oomph, and people did not like that. And if you look at their stats, you could figure out pretty quickly why. But either way, that was what came out originally, and then there was some leaks thanks to the Players Association that Caitlin was going to win Rookie of the Year when they put out their statement about Christine Brennan a few weeks ago. But now it's official. The voters have spoken. 66 and 67 say it. Jake Caitlin was the best rookie this year.
Okay.
Hey, is that defined as close? Can you just answer that for me? Would you define that as a close race?
I can't lie. That's closer than I thought it would be. 67 voters.
Well, and I don't know. So these voters for the WNBA Rookie of the Year are who?
Media voters. I was one of them, to be clear. But there's some chosen in every market of every team. I think there's 2 or 3.
So these are media members that cover a WNBA team, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. One team or the whole league, correct.
So do we know, and a lot of times the voters have to release their vote or it goes public. I guess it's fairly inconsequential, but it's of note or interest because of just the rivalry aspect of it. The one vote that prohibited Caitlin Clark from being the unanimous Rookie of the Year was a vote for Angel Reese. Do we know who voted that vote?
No, in fact, you say that in the NBA and in most sports that ballots are released. In the W, they are not historically released. So we actually will probably never find out unless someone like Foy is the league. But, it's a big point of consternation a few years ago when Angel Wilson got a 4th place MVP vote the year she barely didn't win the award instead of Brianna Stewart. So it's been a thing for a while, people wondering who votes for who in the W, and I don't think we'll ever find out who voted for Angel.
It is obviously a great award for Caitlin Clark. It's great for the Indiana Fever, no question, and for the city itself. Does it in any way, shape, or form, are there any, because it's a WNBA award, Tony, contractually speaking, like bonuses or things like that, does it in any way, shape, or form impact Caitlin Clark's life or standing other than a nice trophy?
It does not have any financial bonus with it. I think she'll get like $5,100 or something is how the CBA reads it works for Rookie of the Year. But no impact on like the Fever's team spending or their future in terms of that kind of money. I think it's just good job, Caitlin. You earned this money. You were the best rookie by far.
The main headline is the Rookie of the Year award, but something that we started speculating about a couple of months ago was, man, she might wind up getting some MVP votes here. Not only does she get MVP votes, but she winds up finishing 4th in MVP voting. The significance of that aspect of it for her to do that in year 1, Tony.
Yeah, that's the more significant part to me is that people have determined she's already a top 5 whatever player. I voted her for 5th in MVP, so I guess I'm a little lower than everybody else, which is crazy. But regardless, insane. Pat Boylan, who does play-by-play for the Fever, had this, which is crazy. There are now, including Caitlin, 5 players who won Rookie of the Year and also finished top 5 in MVP voting. That's Tamika Catchings, legend. Candace Parker, legend. Diana Taurasi, obviously legend. Elena Deladon, and Caitlin, right? So the crew of players who that quickly were that good is extremely small, and that's probably 5 of the best 10, maybe even less than that, 5 of the best 7 players in league history. Maya Moore could sneak in there. Swoops could sneak in there. Leslie could sneak in there. But, she has that trajectory already. I think that's honestly more significant and says a lot about the season she had. The Fever were after she got her footing after the first, 8 games, she was incredible. It was unbelievable how good the Fever were once she figured it out.
Was it her footing, Tony? This is kind of a chicken-egg question, I guess, and we've asked this a lot on the program. Was it more about Caitlin Clark kind of feeling out just the difference between the WNBA, college basketball, et cetera, or was it also because of the vision that she has, just her teammates? And I don't mean that to condescend her teammates at all, but when you have a distributor that is doing it at the level that she was it an acclamation for them as well, or was it basically 50-50?
Yeah, I'd say 50-50, some of both, right? Like, it's a huge team adjustment when someone totally new to your program has the ball that often, right? You even saw that with the Pacers when Halliburton got here in 2022. Every team has that kind of layover, so you have to figure out when you're going to be open and what your signals are and what the plays are and what the timing is and all that. That takes time, right? They were bad at the start of the season. But some of it, too, is like if you watch the games, you could tell that Caitlin was either sometimes rushed or would pick up her dribble too quickly, or just patches that were there in college weren't there in the pros. That happened a lot more in her first 5, 6, 7 games than it ever did throughout the season. And I think after game 14 through the rest of the season, she scored in double figures every night, even though in the first couple she scored in single digits a few times. The last game of the season, she was in single digits, but she only played really the first half, so I'm not really counting that one. So I think that kind of speaks to the fact that it was some kind of adjustments for her as well, that she had to figure out where her spots were and how she could move around the floor. But once she got going and her teammates figured her out, it was lights out. I mean, from that point on, that 25-game sample I just described, she averaged 22 and was like 5 assists away from 10 assists a game. It was 9.8. So she was unbelievable in that stretch and maybe the best offensive player in the league during that time.
She is the third Indiana Fever player to win the WNBA Rookie of the Year award, correct?
That is correct. Tamika Catchings and Aaliyah Boston, both also really, really good players with the other two.
All right, Tony, I know it creates for a busy afternoon for you. I appreciate really the clarification, because when I saw it, I was like, this is cool. And was happy for Caitlin Clark and excited for the city. But then I thought, wait a minute, didn't we already know this? So I wanted to clarify the difference between the two. And this is the more prestigious of the two, even though she won both, correct?
Way more prestigious, yes. The one that you'll actually read about in history books. The thing that's weird about it is when it's so obvious, it's almost less exciting, if that makes any sense. It's still a huge deal. You're obviously right about that, but we all knew. It's just like a formality almost, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes total sense. Yes. So, but nonetheless, cool. And Tony, let's be real. The most exciting part about it is it means we get to have you on the program for a couple minutes, which is always fun, right? And we'll do so soon when the Pacers season begins, right?
Yes, you got it. Very soon. They play a preseason game in 5 days.
Tony East Thursdays might be coming back. All right, let's go. I'm all here for it.
That's right.
Let's do it.
All right, Tony, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Take care.
Tony East joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. It is cool, though, right? Sometimes, though, it's funny. I mean, if you were to go back, like Rookie of the Year winners, if we were to pick, I guess, NBA Rookie of the Year, if you guys had off the top of your head guess right now, and I don't know, I haven't looked at it, is there an anomaly Rookie of the Year? Like, is there a player that came out out of the box and it was like, holy cow, that player, and then within 3 years, you're like, whatever happened to that guy?
Did Michael Carter Williams win Rookie of the Year, Jimmy?
I think he did.
That might be right. That may be right. I mean, I'm trying to think. Sometimes it's somebody that maybe they get into the best circumstance or situation, but obviously in this case that's not the case.
I mean, it would probably be Michael Carter Williams did. Tyreek Evans won one in 2010. You could make the argument that, Malcolm Brogdon won one, and I know he ended up being an NBA champion, but how obscure do you want? Do you want it and then gone?
Michael Carter Williams.
Michael Carter Williams takes the case if that's your goal there. Yeah.
I mean, the Tyreek Evans, by the time he got here, he was an interesting
Emeka Okafor
player.
Maybe.
Boy, that's a really good one. Emeka Okafor. I'm just looking at it here. Okafor's really okay.
I would say either Okafor, Evans, or Carter Williams.
I remember Steve Francis because he was also a Rookie of the Year. Stevie Franchise, at the time it was like, holy cow. How about Ben Simmons? That was the peak of Ben Simmons' career, was it not?
Yeah, that'll be the biggest accomplishment, but he's still in the league.
Correct.
But yes, that'll probably be the biggest accolade of his.
But I think you're right. Michael Carter Williams is the one
that's the pull.
After that, you're like, that was pretty much the peak for him, right? It was exciting last night in Major League Baseball, I'll admit. The home runs, the Brewers game was cool. It was fun. It was fun to watch. I'm sorry that 2 of my teams are out in our beer bet, but I have 2 alive now in the Tigers and the Phillies, and it's probably going to be those 2 in the World Series because that's what I do. I just talk things into reality, right? But I'm guessing that still with baseball ongoing, that probably parlays into a few of Jimmy's plays of the day, brought to you by Greenfield Signs, by the way, but we will find out exactly whether they are or not next.
Today's plays of the day, a mix of MLB wildcard action and Thursday night football. We'll start first in the MLB. Of course, today's plays are brought to you by Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Greenfield Signs, a professional comprehensive sign company with 2 locations in central Indiana. They'll take hold of your project from design all the way to delivery. Family-owned and managed business for more than 4 generations. You can always get a second chance to make a first impression. Make the most out of your first opportunity. Do it with the fine folks at Greenfield Signs and Lighting. For more information, go to greenfieldsigns.com. Today's plays of the day, again, as we mentioned, mix of wild card in the MLB and the NFL regular season Thursday night football tonight on Prime. We'll scoop the 2.5 on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're 2.5-point dogs on the road.
Just play the money line.
By scoop, that means that you're picking that up,
Correct.
right?
I'm picking up the
means
points.
you think
So
Atlanta will cover that.
No, I think Tampa Bay will cover that. Tampa Bay is getting 2.5. They're 2.5-point dogs, so I'm scooping the points. They're giving me points. I'm going to scoop them up. So they're 2.5-point dogs, and that's what we're doing there. In that same game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I will take Buccaneers wide receiver Sterling Shepard over 19.5 total receiving yards.
What?
In baseball.
He's still in the NFL?
I will take the Milwaukee Brewers. That's right. The Fighting Joel Ericksons, the Brew Crew, to win outright over the New York Mets. Eddie Garrison, any plays from you?
That would be a historic win, Jimmy. Do you know why?
Why is that?
I asked you if you knew why.
I don't know why. It's why I asked, why is that?
Okay, so since the playoff format has changed in 2022 in the divisional in the wild card round, they would be the first team to lose the first game and win the series.
Wow.
Out of 12 series.
Wow.
The
Could be
team
a
that
big
has won
night.
the first. This is only the second time in the 12 that it's even gone to a game 3.
Could be a big night in the Erickson household for sure.
I will be taking Kirk Cousins over 229.5 passing yards. I think that rush defense for Tampa Bay will neutralize that, and I think the way to beat them if you're Atlanta is by throwing the football. I will also take Kirk Cousins to throw an interception. I know Jason Hammer played that this morning on the wake-up call with KB and Andy, and then in Major League Baseball, I will take the New York Mets to win over the Milwaukee Brewers.
All right. There you go. Those are your plays of the day.
Did you say there's a guy who his over-under in receiving yards is 19.5?
It is.
How bad do you have
I had no idea Sterling Shepard was still
Well, that's
in
why
the
his
NFL.
over-under's 19.5. And you're taking which on
I'm
that?
going the over, baby. Give me the over. Life's too short to bet the under.
I mean, how many – what's he done so far on the season?
Look, I'll be genuinely honest with you. I'll go take a peek behind the curtain. There's a couple different models that I utilize for betting purposes with player props, and one of them really likes that play. So it was just a throw-in of I'm going to back this model. I'm going to go with it. It's not because I have this lifetime belief in Sterling Shepard.
He has 3 catches for 51 yards on the season.
So you're saying that he's due for a nice night.
All coming in their most recent game.
All he needs is
give him one. He's good. 2
thrown his way, right?
That's all you need.
He's got – here's the thing, though. He's got 5 targets on the year. Now, I'm not saying that it's time to call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. But if you're looking at it,
is
and
that
you
better
are,
or worse than the Euro bets? Would you say?
What's
you
that?
had a problem with the Euro bets when we were betting Euros as well? Is that better or worse? Or a cut from the same cloth?
I mean, all I'm saying is this.
Coming off a big game, though. 3 catches, 51 yards, all in one
what I
game.
This is simply my point. I don't know this to be true, but I have this odd assumption that if you are like, I'm envisioning a guy sitting in his residence, hanging on, like on the phone with his guy, screaming at the television that Sterling Shepard needs to be thrown the ball. And I'm imagining like an ankle-deep pool of pull tabs all over the floor with maybe some peanut shells and a couple warm cans of Olympia.
Sounds like a Texas Roadhouse from the 2000s.
The guy that played Paulie in the Rocky movies, like he strikes me as a guy that probably is hung up on whether or not Sterling Shepard is going to get 20 yards receiving.
Here's what's going to happen. Sterling Shepard, when he gets over 19.5 receiving yards tonight, I'm going to call you, Jake, and I'm going to reenact the old West Coast LA calls to the newsroom back at the hey Jake, can you tell me if Sterling Shepard hit his over?
I'm telling you, that was so fun when I'd work at Channel 6 and the phone would ring at 12:45 at night because we'd be in there cutting stuff after the show, getting ready for the next day. Sports. Do you happen to know who won the San Jose State Honolulu game? San Jose State it's Hawaii, Honolulu, the Rainbows. Yeah, let me look that up. Hang on. Is San Jose State, it was 82-79, I think. They were given 3, right? Dude, you got a serious problem, man. Do you know if Sterling Shepard went over 19 yards? Now, what if he's sitting? What about this? What if he's got one catch for 10 yards, and then the second catch, can you imagine?
Yeah.
He gets a 10-yard reception, but they say that his forward progress was stopped at the 9-yard mark.
You know what we call that?
Or there was a
There's
penalty.
going to be a dumpster fire based on that,
We call
right?
that a bad beat. We call that.
That's right.
No, that's not the definition of bad.
It
beat.
absolutely would be a bad beat
No.
if you were there. No. He had the 10 yards. You're celebrating he had the 10 yards, and they mark it at forward progress. That's absolutely a bad
Okay,
beat.
is this a bad beat? You take a team, and you are getting 9 points.
Uh-huh.
They're down 2 with like a minute to go in the game.
Yes.
The opposition scores, goes up 8, and then goes for 2 and converts it and wins by 10.
Yes, that is the more crystal clear definition
I
of
have
bad
a buddy
beat. Yes.
that happened to. And when he was in Vegas, this was like 30 years ago. He was in Vegas, and he's like, you know what? It was Akron and I think like Toledo on a Thursday night. And he's like, I'll just do this to get, for something to watch.
Action, baby.
There was, so we can give a shout out to this because it is of our, parent affiliation, but Scott Van Pelt has his bad beats segment that he does throughout the entire year of that exact scenario playing out. Over under was 65.5 in the Boise State game over the weekend with 1:10 to play in the third quarter. Game was 17-10. That's 27 total points for those of you keeping score at home. 1:10 left to play in the third quarter. The over hit.
Wait, no, say that again. The over under was
65.5 was the over under. 1:10 to play in the third quarter. 27 total points were scored, and the over hit. The over of 65.5 hit.
So in other
a
words,
span of 13 minutes of game time.
So is that a bad beat or just
that's an awful beat.
Well, because they scored 40 points in the last.
Yes. Yeah.
They went nuts.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough.
I love
Fair
bad
enough.
beats. I mean, I feel for people, but the idea of them.
Well, or like
fascinates
some
me.
guy hits a 3-quarter shot, at the buzzer type
yes,
thing.
Yeah.
So
that
a bad
happens
beat
from time
for
to
a
time.
player prop, Jimmy. I'll give you this. When the Colts were playing, I believe it was Houston, week number 1. I had Jonathan Taylor to get it was 50 yards rushing or something, and they're at the goal line, and he has the carry from the 5 to the 3 or the whatever.
Yeah.
Put him at 51.
Uh-huh.
Next carry loses 2 yards, 49.
Brutal.
That's a bad beat right there.
Yeah, I mean, you get that kind of stuff. I just go back to me personally. I don't know, but if somebody was in charge of my checkbook and I found out they were putting money on Sterling Shepard at 19 points, I think they should just simply be. I'm not going to say badly beaten, but
The most degenerate thing I've done this year is over under total points for Hawaii game week 0, and it hit on a punt return touchdown at the Horn. It was beautiful.
I wonder how many people I wonder how many times Hawaii gets wagered on simply because they're the last
All the
game
time,
of the
Jake.
night and people
all the
want
time,
it.
right?
All the
Make it all
time.
back, baby.
That's got to happen a lot, right?
Yes. Yes.
Or people love the euphoria of waking up in the morning and finding out they
Little
won the
wake and
late game.
cash. Little wake and cash. Let's go. Come on now.
All right, so obviously you'll be paying attention to that tonight, Major League Baseball as well. Tomorrow, big show lined up. Look forward to it for the Colts and the Jags, getting you set for that game. We'll also look at college football. But as part of our former Colt Friday, Chris Hinton will join us on tomorrow's program. One of the really, really good players and perennial Pro Bowl level players for the Colts in their early years here in Indianapolis. His son now playing at Michigan, and he played at Northwestern, who has Indiana coming up this weekend. So it should be a fun conversation tomorrow. So we will get to that tomorrow. John is at Parks Place Pub, right, guys?
Yes, sir. And Fishers.
That's an awesome place in Fishers. And this, let me tell you, right now, especially because they have kind of an open-air environment to it, and the weather is perfect outside, you got time to get up and enjoy a beverage. Diet Coke's perfectly sufficient while watching John and a Larceny Bourbon. That's up next. We will talk to you at noon tomorrow on Corey & Company.